TruthSeekah and/or its affiliates are not responsible for any strange phenomena that may occur during or after listening to this podcast, which may include the following: heightened senses of awareness, psychic abilities, UFO sightings, alien contact, time loss, out-of-body experiences, ringing in the ears, ESP, lucid dreaming, increased synchronicities, astral projection, telepathy, stronger intuition, levitation, miraculous healings, and/or remote viewing. Please be advised to listen at your own discretion.
Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? To a place to walk on troubled seas, faith to stand when I don't believe. I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come?
You are now locked into the TruthSeekah podcast.
Gargoyles, psychics, everything's ungodly. Dark savage.
Streaming live at TruthSeekah.com.
She's not a Christian.
Give it up, y'all.
Your portal to the paranormal, esoteric, and all things spiritual.
She's tampering in dark savage stuff.
And now, your host, TruthSeekah.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're now locked in, tuned in, dialed in to the TruthSeekah podcast. Excited, delighted to be with you guys today on this beautiful day. And we're going to discuss all things spiritual like we always do. Today we're going to be discussing the healing power of myth, mythology, allegory, all of that good stuff wrapped into one. So if you want to explore that with us, make sure you stick around. I want to give a huge shout out to everybody who's been supporting my work via Patreon. Couldn't do it without your help. Again, start of every show. Thank you guys again from the bottom of my heart for everything that you guys do. This show does not exist without your help. Thank you guys. And so we give a shout out to some of the latest patrons within the last week or so. Shout out to Beverly McLee, Toby Melicon, Charlene Duckworth, and Shayna. Thank you guys for partnering with me, believing in the vision, and coming on with me, making this happen. If you'd like to do that, head on over to patreon.com/TruthSeekah. There you get access to my entire discography of work, which is like 10 plus albums. You get access to all the latest stuff that I'm working on right now. I'm working on an EP entitled the ESP EP. It's going to be a couple tracks talking about spirituality, extrasensory perception, and how we tap into it. So it's going to be inspired by that. I just did the Colors EP. That's available. 7 songs, each song inspired by one of the 7 chakras. That's available. And you get the stuff months before it's available to the general public, and a bunch of exclusive stuff as well. You also get access to our Thursday night School of the Mystics, which is tonight, Thursday. This is our community aspect to what we're building. Get access to our Discord. Bunch of really cool stuff. Head on over there. Just check it out. Just see what I have to offer. Different tiers, different levels. Patreon.com/TruthSeekah. Thank you guys for that. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring on today's guest, Ann Cates Sullivan. I want to make sure I said it right, because I wanted to say Ann. It's Ann, though. There's a big distinction there, right? It's A-Y-N, but pronounced Ann, right?
Yes, or Ain.
Ann.
Yes.
There you go. What's the distinction there? Because there is a big distinction in the meaning of it you talked about before we went live.
Well, my parents named me Anne, spelled it A-Y-N, which is different. But when I was doing my Celtic studies, I realized there was a goddess who was connected to the light, and her name is Ania. So Ain is my name. So I found my Celtic tradition with my name.
Awesome. We're going to talk about your two books here. We have Heroines of Avalon and Other Tales, and Legends of the Grail, Stories of the Celtic goddess. We're going to talk about some of the symbology, the allegory, and just essentially the power of myth, pulling some of the characters and stories out of those books. But also, I want to hear your take on it and why, how did you find out the power of myth? Like, was there anything that inspired you? We'll get into that in a little bit, but I guess first just kind of set up your background, let people know who you are and what you bring to the table. We'll start there.
So, my background. Well, in the sort of most mundane sense, I decided very early on I was a writer, and so I went to Hollins University and Columbia University, and I got a overseas research to King's College London, which was great because I got to leave the South. We're both from the South, right? I got to leave the South and really travel. It was important to me because our family has a land grant in Virginia. These great grandparents are buried in the backyard.
Wow.
So I got to go find my ancestors. So it was my truth-seeking experience. I had to go find out, who are these ancestors? Why do they matter? Why am I here? How is life unfolding? So that's what set me on the quest. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Buried in the backyard. That's where I want to be buried.
Me too.
I've been talking to my wife about that. We've been discussing it. Like, I don't want the traditional funeral. I want to be just like wrapped in a white sheet and laid to rest in the backyard or something like that. You got to discuss these things because I've been to some really mundane funerals, and it should be a time of mourning, grieving, but also a time of celebration. So, I mean, do you know any of the background on why they chose to do that? I mean, were they not a wealthy family that couldn't afford to be buried on someone else's land? Like, how does that work out?
If my research is correct, they came over in 1668, and America hadn't even been formed. Well, America had been formed, but the United States hadn't been formed. So I think, when someone died, you just drug them outside and made a big hole. And, in Virginia, it's still legal. You can still do that. I came back recently. I've been all over the world, but I came back recently because my father died last year, and I was with him for his crossing. And it was, he did it. He actually crossed like a Celtic king. We used the Celtic traditions and crossed. He actually did cremation, but it was so wonderful to go back to the top of the mountain to really connect with the spirits that he knew, and I was the minister for the service. We did a Druid ceremony, and I could feel the sadness of the departure, but also the ecstasy of the connection. So I continue to work with his essence. Death is quite a process. It can be amazing, and it can be terrifying, and so forth.
Yeah.
I think that's one reason. One of the things that I actually did it last week in England. I went into one of the long barrows. Have you ever had that kind of experience where you actually, it's part of the Celtic tradition where you have to put your hand over your head, and you do it at night, and you crawl into the long barrows, which is where people are buried. It's their mausoleum. It's 5,000-year-old mausoleum. Wow. And you put your hand over your head, and you crawl in with your drum or your rattle or whatever. You crawl in with some friends. And the idea is that you want to get in touch with your ancestors. And so it's a way of making peace with death. So you go in and the really old days, you would pull the skulls out. We didn't do that. but we did go in and drum. And there were some people there who were kind of terrified. Yeah. They were new to that tradition. And then there were other people who were really feeling the depth of the cosmos, the depth of the natural world. So you kind of dissolve into the cosmic space.
Yeah.
And when you crawl out, because there are all these ancient symbols written on the side of these. Wow. When you crawl back out again.
Where was this at?
See, this was a long barrow in Somerset in southwest England.
Okay, England. I would say, is this in Virginia? Hold on.
No, in Virginia. Yeah, there are places you can go to, Native American places and old, graveyards and so forth. And for some reason, I've always loved to do that, just to sit and feel my ancestors, feel the love. I feel very loved by them.
Yeah. Was it okay? So was there any psychedelics involved? I mean, obviously if you have the drums and things like that, that puts your body into a trance state anyway. But was there any psilocybin or anything like that involved at all with connecting?
I didn't take anything. I mean, I think people do go in sometimes and they take mushrooms or something. I think it's, but I found that it's so powerful. Like, just to go in, and we recorded it. You could hear whispers, and you could hear, you could hear hissing. You could hear, I thought it was hissing. Somebody, we all were trying to decide what it was, but we heard other voices. And to me, that's probably enough. I think, when you go, if you went in on mushrooms, you would be more, you would be connected to a different realm. You'd be connected to the trees and the fungus and it might be a different activity. Maybe that's a woodland activity. Whereas, if you're going into a long bear, I would think you really want to keep your wits about you, because when we came out, I actually have a picture. When we came out, there was someone took a photo, and there was a light being standing in front of the tunnel.
Wow. So what did you take away from that? Did you feel more connected? Was there an overcoming, which maybe this comes in stages maybe, but overcoming the fear of death, Like, what did you take away from that experience?
Yeah, I think this year when my father got ill, and he sort of reached out and he wanted to hold my hand. He said, how is this going to go? How's this death process going to go? And since I've been in this Celtic tradition as a walker between the worlds and making relationships with the other side, I said, Dad, I don't really know, but let's hold hands and travel there together and see what happens. And he was so open-minded. I really give him some credit, because he really struggled for a long time with whether he was an atheist or whether he believed in anything or he didn't believe anything. And so we always had these conversations. And but when he got ready to go, he was like grabbing onto me going, okay, how's this going to work? Mm-hmm. And so we did. We walked between the worlds. And by that, I mean, we didn't take anything, because in the Celtic tradition, the Celtic shaman, unlike the shaman here, they don't necessarily use, they might use mushrooms, but generally speaking, you use a rattle or a drum to just put yourself in an altered state. Yeah. And you get to be, if you do it a lot, if you journey weekly, you make friends on the other side. So in that tradition, maybe Taliesin is a friend, or Merlin, or King Arthur, or a lot of the deities are in my books, but you actually journey to the other world, to Avalon, to Tirnaban, to Tirnog. You do you actually, in that tradition, you find a tree, find a doorway in the tree, and you travel down or you travel up in the Celtic tree of life. So you go into the underworld, which is not a hell realm. It's a place of the ancestors. Or you're going to go into the Middle Earth because you're finding out something that's going on here. Or you're going to go into the upper worlds, where you're probably going to meet some guides. Somebody has some wisdom for you. And so there's this whole ancient tradition where you find your grail, your wholeness, your true nature. So we did that together, and he was able to contact his friends. And when he was able to contact his friends, he knew it was okay to go. The fear disappeared, and so he was able to walk.
You actually walked him through that process and carried him to the other side whenever he made that transition.
I think it's something that's really important for us to be able to do with particularly our family members, but other people too that maybe really love us and trust us. It's it's a real gift to be able to spend that time with someone, and we shouldn't be frightened of it. It can actually be oddly ecstatic. And I mean, not that we won't miss them. Of course, we're going to miss them. But I think there's, when a baby's being born, you need a midwife, and when someone's dying, you need a midwife.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah.
We went to we did a men's retreat, a hangout thing where we did psilocybin, and we wanted to connect. We knew that it was going to be a time of self-discovery, shedding of the old skin. I had friends who were bound by opiate addiction, and they wanted to kick it, and everybody had something that they needed direction in their life. So we know that we did the Golden Teachers, and we had this ceremony, and we were on the Indian reservation. I'm half Poach Creek Indian, so we were on the reservation. And whenever we tapped in, you could feel like the force or the universe guiding you and saying, look, this is where all your ancestors have been. They've done this rite of passage. This is where you go when you die. And it is like the ancestors like welcoming you into this realm and saying, hey, it's okay. This is kind of what it looks like when you pass. And I think it was something special about being there on that land with, you know what I'm saying, with the native Indians or whatever. So that you know what I'm saying, that was real powerful. And that was a big thing of overcoming the fear of death versus like, you know, where you're going to go on the other side. But I still get in these weird headspaces about death, man, about time and about, you know, how we can't revisit the past and childhood and things like that. When it can freak you out because it's ever moving. Time waits for nobody. And, you know, it's real scary. And we've got some great memories, and we've made beautiful memories on the earth. And you're almost plagued by these memories. We're creating beautiful memories, and now we're like, man, I want to just relive them. And I wonder how that's going to look like on the other side. Are we going to get to reminisce and maybe time travel back into that space where we were kids playing in the field, or, you know, holding your baby for the first time, or your baby speaking their first words, or walking, and, you know, things like that, and as you get older, it seems like time's moving faster. I know time's not moving at all. It just is, but our perception of it. So that's why it's so important to stay in the moment and live in the moment. But I've been kind of weirded out lately. It'll like so much so where it'll like overwhelm me. Like I'll start feeling like I'm claustrophobic, like with these just memories just hitting me. Like, oh my God, hold on, I need to take a breath, quit thinking about this stuff. You know, it's really weird, just really weird headspace. It comes and goes for me. But with that being said, as far as like the death process, we went to a funeral for my cousin. My cousin recently passed away, and they're from New Orleans, and they're diehard Saints fans, Saints football, the whole family. And so it was kind of the tradition was they said everybody wear Saints clothing, wear a Saints t-shirt, baseball cap, whatever, jersey. So we wore I had a Saints jersey I bought 15 years ago. I wore the jersey. So we went there, and I've been really used to these really weird Christian funerals where it's real sad, everybody's mourning. There's a person reading the eulogy who doesn't even know your family. You know, they're just reading about your life, and it's just really awkward at some of these funerals I've been to. But this funeral was the first one like that, where they just had everything decorated in Saints memorabilia, and they had his pictures up and stuff like that, and let everybody get up and say what they wanted to say. And this was held in a backyard. It was somebody's backyard, and his aunt, and it was different. It was sad. We were mourning, but after we did the ceremony and service, it turned into like a family reunion. Everybody was opening up cold beers and listening to, you know, the music that he enjoyed, you know, and it was really different, you know, and it was awesome though. It was a good way to remember that person and see them through on the other side, just to let them know that they're gonna live on through your memories. So. You know, I've been to some really weird ones though that are like, please don't let this happen for me. When I pass, please don't have some random man reading my eulogy and stuff. You know, death is a weird one, and people come up with different ideas to what, you know, how they're going to be okay with it. You know, you hear about some people crossing over. I've heard stories of people screaming as their spirit leaves their body. They're screaming. They don't want to die, and they're scared. They don't know what to expect, you know. So I think that's why religion and things like that exist, for us to kind of be okay with that.
Exactly. I mean, I think if you do have a tradition at the end, it helps. And I don't know if it matters what the tradition is, whether it's Native American, whether it's Christian, whether it's Celtic, whatever it is. I don't think it matters, but it does give you a context for walking. But you know, we're in our culture, we don't want to talk about death in this particular culture. And in the Celtic world, one of the things that I really liked about it was that there was a time every year to talk about death, which was Samhain, it's October 31st to November 2nd.
Yeah.
You know, so Day of the Dead. And there is a tradition there where you do crawl in at that point and you make the connection to the ancestors. And of course, what makes you, what terrifies you is that you're confronted with your own demise. You realize that this body is going to drop away, and nobody wants to think about that. You know, it's like, no, I'm going to continue forever in some way. Of course we do, as light beings, we do. But I think, you know, we're in this time of awakening on the planet right now. This shift is happening. It's pretty intense. And one of the things that quite often happens when you're in that awakening process is that you go through an ego death.
Yeah.
And that can be as terrifying as physical deaths, you know, and people can back away from it and actually stop their own awakening. So I think if we can get together with groups that we really trust, you know, people who are really truth seekers like you are, and really inquire together into this subject, I think it's healthy. I think it's very, very healthy. And so when someone dies, we can, instead of going through our own freak out process, we can really sit with them and hold their hand and walk with them. I think it's really powerful, you know?
Yeah, it could be hard. Like you're saying, everyone's going through this awakening. And for me, it's definitely been hard, especially when there's a transition. I mean, you know, death in itself is a transition. So going through that ego death and finding out who you really are, and then being okay with that. You know, a lot of people abandon their careers. You know, they get abandoned by friends and family. And for me, it was, you know, the church, you know, realm that I come out of, you know, having the spiritual awakening, and then, you know, having this, you know, being somebody, you know, in that in that realm, you're somebody, and then now you're nobody, now you're nothing, now you're the laughing stock, or whatever the case is of that people group. And that could be disheartening when it happens all of a sudden, you know, because you find your identity in that, you know, and your identity is not in these different personas or how these people know you as. And so when you have that ego death, or you become born again, as the scriptures would say, it could be a very painful experience. And so I kind of went through the dark night of the soul when I went through that. And I've had some dark times with dealing with black magic and witchcraft and Satanism and some really dark things. But going through it on this side was almost just as dark as dealing with anything demonic, or, you know, because it could be lonely. And maybe that's the thing that we're afraid of, being alone. You know, and when you have you're forsaken by everyone, and maybe people feel like that's what death is, that I'm forsaken, that I'm not going to be a part of the family anymore, that I'm going to be by myself. Like, that's scary, you know, but that's not the truth, right? I mean, there's different traditions and different testimonies and stories about people who have crossed over, who have these beautiful stories, and a lot of them tend to tie around something very similar: the light, the Christ being, you know, the mother energy, right? And just being able to tap in with the ancestors waiting for them, you know, to embrace them when they cross over. You hear all these different stories.
And you hear it over and over and over again. I mean, in the Celtic world, they have wakes, you know, which sounds more like what your cousin did, where you have a gathering of people, and they're singing and they're drinking and they're telling stories about you, and they're celebrating your life. And they might also be crying or keening or weeping, or, you know, every emotion's there. And what I like about the wake, is that nothing, you don't have to hold back. You just share whatever. If you hated the person, if you loved the person, if you loved and hated.
Yeah. You got to act like there was a good person on this side. Yeah, we love him. Like, hold on. Right? He was not a good person, you know?
Right. You can say that too, right? There was like, oh, I hated that part of this person. But it gives you a space to actually be real and truthful and talk about it. So I love that tradition. And also, if people don't want to talk about anything, that's also fine. But I think when we allow ourselves to grieve, when we allow ourselves to face that darkness, that dark night of the soul, actually the thing that took me on the quest to find these books was my own dark night of the soul. Where I was going through my awakening, and nothing was making sense in the old way anymore. Mm-hmm. This was in the early 90s, and I had to figure out what I was being called into. And it you know, I was also raised in the South and went to church, and having messages come from an outer authority wasn't really making sense to me anymore. I went to India, hung out with Amachi, went to Durga Puja. I was like, wow, there are these traditions where there are goddesses. There are these traditions where there are a lot of deities, and they're all tapped into the cosmos and the divine. This is really interesting. I also like the Native American tradition, but I don't have a drop of Native American blood, so I wasn't welcomed into that community. But what I did find because I was in England is I found my indigenous European roots, the Celtic roots. So I had one particular experience at the Chalice Well, which is in Glastonbury, a place you probably really love if you ever get over there. It's a place that's been it's kind of the Jerusalem of Britain. It's the home of King Arthur and Guinevere, but the Druids were trained there. The high priestesses of Avalon were trained there. So it's been a gathering place for seekers for, some people say 25,000 years. Who knows? That might be too long, but a good 10,000 years. And so there's a tour you can walk up, and then there's this very sacred well. Some say that you find the masculine energies on the tour, it's the mountain that goes up, and some say you find the feminine energies at the Chalice Well. And so that particular day, I had a very strong meditation and experience with the Black Mother. And with an experience, it was a vision, but it was also a felt sense, and it was the smell of roses, and it was the feeling of truly being embraced by a very loving deity. And that set me on the quest to find the Grail Maidens, the Celtic goddess tradition. And in those days, it was, I think they're known more now, but in those days, it had been repressed. I mean, until 100 years ago, if you spoke Gaelic or told any of these stories, you could be killed.
Wow.
But I was given a stipend to walk the west coast of Ireland and to collect the folklore. And I went, well, this is really great. You've got women who are, if you want to be a hero or a king in that tradition, you have to go to the goddess Gaia, and she has to train you so that you learn your magic, so that you can be struck by lightning and survive it, so that you can cast a glamour. And maybe there are 3 of you there, but it looks like 10,000. So in that tradition, it's the feminine that ignites the magic within the masculine. So there's a lovely balance between the two.
So what led you to the tradition? Was it just on your seeking process, or did you seek out other traditions? You're talking about, the Native American roots or whatever. Was you looking into all of these things until you kind of, saw what works best for you, or was it you looking into your ancestry? What actually led you to the Celtic tradition?
Yeah, I was definitely a seeker from early on. From probably 8, I was a seeker. And so I tried all kinds of traditions. So I went to church originally, and I loved it. I loved reading the Bible with our friend, the minister, but it wasn't enough. And I got into philosophy, and then I studied with the rabbi. I studied Kabbalah with the rabbi, which was a huge awakening experience, but still knowledge is still intellect. But it gave me a framework. Tree of Life gave me a framework. So I kept looking and went to India. I think India is a place where you can really have full tilt awakenings. And oh gosh, I loved India. I didn't really want to come back. I was there several months, and it was an amazing time. And when I came back from India, I was like, okay, I have to find my own tradition. And I originally tried with doing some Native American wheels, and I was kicked out. They were like, you're blonde, you're white, you're. So I'm like, okay, I got to look towards the Vikings or the Tuatha De Danann. So I really started to find my true lineage, my true tradition in Ireland and the West Coast, and I really actually like the Celtic Church, where things are very blended. Where you have the old pagan belief systems, and they're blended quite easily with the Christian beliefs. Because in that tradition, they have Lu, who's the sun god. So when people came over and they were talking about Jesus, that just we know who this archetype. This is the archetype of the Son of Light, and we celebrate him every solstice.
The Son of God, yeah.
What might have changed is that in the dark time, at Yule, at Christmas time, they would celebrate the goddess. So you would celebrate the darkness of the year, and you might celebrate the Kaliach, the old woman of the world who carries the wisdom, and also Bridget, the one who carries the torch of light. These two, they hand off. They hand off in the springtime. So the old woman of the year rules half the year, and the young woman of the year rules another half. So Bridget, the young woman, the springtime goddess, survives into Christianity. She becomes Saint Bridget. She's the midwife of Jesus.
Yeah.
Also, some of the other ones go through. Anu, the original mother goddess, becomes Saint Anne. And Danu becomes Mary. So you can find those wonderful goddesses. And of course, when you really go, it's not so much about. I like learning. Obviously, I have a PhD, but I think what's really important, though, is to go and sit in the landscape, whatever your landscape is, to sit in the landscape and feel what's there. That there are, that's one way when we have our shoes off and our feet in the soil, then that's when we can really get in touch with some of these archetypes without just spinning out, losing it, right? Which can happen.
Heck
so you start to feel, oh my gosh, you start to feel, I smell roses. I'm feeling this. I'm feeling an embrace by a presence, a really beautiful, ancient presence. And at that point, this isn't insanity. This is reality beyond maybe in a reality I've encountered before. But at that point, when you start to have those experiences, then it leads you to the next one and the next one and the next one. I think curiosity is what keeps it going. Yeah.
Yeah, and there should be some curiosity there, especially because you're talking about, like the Christian tradition and what we have now. Like all of that's been erased, but that was held in high regard, even by like the Catholic Church, who kind of took their, all of these different teachings and kind of borrowed them and just changed the names, changed the characters, and kept the high holy days and really kept the essence of, the celebrations or whatever. We're talking about, the Day of the Dead in Mexico and things like that, and just, connecting with the other side, and that kind of turns into, All Hallows Eve, into, Halloween, and the spirits of the ancestors coming back to the places that they lived, and they want treats or food, and if you don't give them that food, then they play a trick on you, trick or treat, and then you also have, All Saints Day, which was the Catholic tradition, which is taken from every culture had something very similar during that time, where they honored the saints or honored the ones that came before them. And looking at that, and it just gets deeper and deeper, because now I'm into like the allegory of the Bible and understanding the archetypes of the people, especially in the Old Testament, right? You have, take your pick, right? King David, Solomon, all of these people who their stories have so much, impact and so much like deep intricacies in the stories that, we try to, I don't know why, but we try to, maybe it makes us for some reason, it adds more validity for people if it was actually real. But the messages behind their story, and the messages behind their life, and their messages behind their interaction with their enemies, they all play like this bigger role within our lives and our own interaction with our inner demons and our inner giants that we face. And Moses dealing with the golden calf, and all of his followers and all of his friends turning to idolatry, and all of these things. And there's so much hidden within these stories. And then I look at that with the Bible, and then even the Apostle Paul kind of refers back to Abraham and stuff like that. He says these people were an allegory. These were for a lesson for you. And even Paul quotes it. And seeing the power of allegory in the Bible, and then I look into maybe the Hindu tradition, and you hear about all of these different gods. And it's so weird, because in the West, the Christians kind of make fun. Oh, they have 9,000 gods, and all this kind of stuff. And say, hold on, Like all of those deities are a personification of the one. They're different aspects for whatever you're going through, a personification that goes back to the one. You know, even the Bible says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one." Then I look in, this was just of recently, and you're talking about how a lot of these goddesses and things and saints and were like, their names were changed a little bit, and they kind of got some deification. These really interesting people who were like pillars in England, and now they're saints in the Christian tradition, right? And people pray to those saints or ask the saints to pray for them for whatever they're going through. Like if you're dealing with, if you're, you know, about to have a baby, like there's specific saints that you pray to or to ask them to pray for you, because they've been through that. You know what I'm saying? And to see how even all of the saints in Catholicism are a personification of the one. You know, they all point back to the one. When I came to that understanding, man, it was just, and it's all of them, all of the different, you know, the whole, you know, Trinity in every religion, and all the different archetypes and pillars, they all point back to the one.
Exactly. The one great intelligence that can take on many different forms. And I think the divine mystery takes on forms so that we can understand it. I mean, if we were all formless, how would we learn? How would we? So I think we must agree to enter into a dualistic realm so that we can have an experience of male, female, black, white, good, bad, all of these different things, so that we grow in terms of consciousness. It'd be hard to do that otherwise. Yeah, in the Celtic world, if you were a bard, you would learn 250 stories of your people, and that was really important, because if you knew the stories of your people, which we do biblically too. I did a year of reading the Old Testament with a rabbi, which was really, really profound, because those are the stories of our Western civilization, and we understand Western civilization when we actually read the Bible, because we're all influenced by that, whether we like it or not. We're all influenced by it. You know, in the Celtic tradition, it was a little fun. It was fun. It was refreshing, because it was a book there were books of mythology, like the Mabinogion or the Liber Gabala, that I wasn't familiar with. So I could tap into some of these stories. And some of them might have biblical connections. Like the first story in Legends of the Grail is the story of Caesar. And Caesar was the granddaughter of Noah. And she wasn't allowed to board the ark because she was in the wrong lineage. She was in the lineage of Cain, not Abel. And so they said, sorry, you're going to drown in the flood. So she was actually a seer, an oracle. So she didn't really like that I did too much. So she thought, well, shoot, I'll just make my own boat. So she builds her own ark, puts her horses on it, 50 of her friends. And when the storm comes, when the flood comes, her boat set sail. And so in the story, you have her in the darkness swirling. And this is one of those moments where you have to experience your ego death. Am I gonna live through this? Is there a higher power? Is someone actually gonna rescue me? Is someone going to help? If I throw the light of my heart, is there help coming? And in the story, it's the goddess of Ireland, Eru, who reaches for her in the darkness and carries her to Ireland. So in the Liber Gabala, in that tradition, which is now a myth, once upon a time it was history, she was the first person to step foot there. So that was, in some traditions, that's the beginning of the goddesses of Ireland.
What influenced you to be able to write these stories within a story, essentially, right? I mean, that's what the allegory and myth is, right? You're reading one story, but they're really trying to impart some deep wisdom to you. And like you're talking about, even using it for inner healing and things like that. Like, you know what I'm saying? What was your inspiration? Was it these holy books? Was it the stories of the Bible and the stories of the goddesses and things like that? You know, the Hindu tradition. Was you into, what's his name? Joseph Campbell at all, who's like really big on, the power of myth and things like that,
Yeah. Well, I think as a child, I was disappointed in the churches that I went to because I couldn't find my face. I couldn't find my voice. I was like, do I belong here? I mean, women, what do you get a choice between being a mother, a saint, or a whore? I think that, I think maybe I have more possibilities than that, and then you go into the culture, this is also 35 years ago, but you go into the culture and it's kind of the same thing. It's like, something's wrong here. Something's missing. I'm not finding all the many archetypes that I'm looking for. And of course I got influenced. I did a degree in psychology, and I got very influenced by Joseph Campbell and the idea of the white goddess. So, if you get inspired by something, what do? You go on a quest. Okay, so where am I going to find this? And so in my quest in Britain and Ireland, I would go to the places like Avebury. Avebury is a very powerful place, and it's called Avebury because Eve, they say Eve's buried, Eve's umbilicus, some say, is in that space. So this is a stone circle that's a mile in diameter. And it's a very powerful place. In fact, right now it's super powerful. The ley lines have tripled in size. And so whatever's happening energetically on the planet, the ley lines have tripled in size. The energy of the place is on. So when you go to those places and you listen, you have to go past, the witch burning and all the people who were just killed for being heretics or whatever. You have to get through all that and then actually listen to the landscape. So that's what I did in the book. So each character that I work with, there, I think 6 or 7 in each book, would go to the place. Like for instance, the Cailleach. A lot of people are frightened of the Cailleach because they think of her as a witch or an old woman, or a crone. I guess she's considered the crone. So people are frightened of old age. So there's something about going to that place, and one of her places is La Creu in Ireland. And you go, and you got the wind, and you got sheep. There's nobody there, and you walk up this hill, and you start to commune with. We would know her as Gaia, Mother Earth. In the Celtic tradition, she's Cailleach. So you go and you start to, just as you maybe as you did when you did your psilocybin experience, but when you're in a power spot, you don't even need it because the energy is so powerful. It will put you into an altered state, and you start. So the land dreams, and so you have to trust yourself to know that it's okay to enter an enchanted world. Yes, we might have a road here, and there might be a bird, and there might be a stone, and it's okay to go through the doorway of the stone and start to explore the living dreams. So what I was doing was going and sitting and consciously dreaming with the energy of the landscape, and so then I would have a sense of, this is the Cailleach. This is the old woman who stirs her pot, who has the seeds of all of life. This is a very powerful mother archetype, the one that gives you life and the one that will take your life too. And she's going to help you in your recycling, however that works. So it's a huge archetype that demands respect. Some of the archetypes, if you work with some of the archetypes, they're lighter, like Bridget, the springtime goddess. And I think her flame was relit, I believe it was in 2015 in Kildare in Ireland. So you can go, man or woman, you can go and you can light this flame to the eternal, to the one who is eternal life, who always brings life back to you. As I said, she appears in the Bible too as Saint Bridget, the midwife of Jesus. So all these archetypes are beings that when we tap into them, we realize we're fairly complicated. We're not one thing. We have different feelings and emotions and expressions and all of this. So archetypes, like if you think just for a minute of magic, and you have the archetype of Merlin. Everybody knows Merlin the magician, right? Mm-hmm. So you think, okay, we get maybe, if we're lucky, 90 years here. So that Merlin archetype is at least 10,000 years old. So when we tap into an archetype like that, what we're doing is we're inviting that magic to awaken within us, right? So when we go and we gather all of these different archetypes and we get to know them, what we're really doing is we're discovering which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It requires, in the Welsh tradition, it's called the gleifiosa, the opening of direct knowing, the opening of the shining brow. And so it's wonderful. And you find these things in every part of the world, it's just nice when you have a tradition, because when you go, oh, hang on a second, I feel like my brow is glowing. You go, oh, it's the gleifiosa. So there's a context, there's a way to understand.
Now, is this, and so this isn't something that comes from without, right? This is something that's already within you, within the psyche, right? Whenever you have that experience. So, because I'm pretty sure there'll be people listening who will say, almost like you're invoking like the spirit to come live within you, but a lot of this stuff is already within you. It's within the psyche. Like, that's why it kind of rings true, because it's already within you, and you've never read the stories, you've never been through the ceremony or whatever, that kind of ignites that spark within you, right? So is it something within you or something from without?
That's a really good question, because I think it can be either. When you're in one of the ancient sites that's dedicated to that deity, it can feel like it's outside of you. But when the essence of that particular, each one carries an essence. So like Bridget carries the essence of life. You feel the essence inside. If you go to the Paps of Anu, where they light, there are these two hills, and they'll light these sort of old nipples that are on the top. They do it because they're celebrating life. So I think it's wonderful to go and you have your feet on the ground, on the earth, and you're experiencing. I mean, this is much better than being depressed and disconnected, right? Which is a lot of the planet's doing. Instead of being depressed and disconnected, you put your feet on the earth and you're walking, and you're finding your beat of your ancestors. So I think the answer, whatever your ancestry is very important. Not that one's better than the other, but there are particular ways they have of working that they'll come to you that way, and they help you understand your own wisdom. So eventually, all of this stuff can fall away, and you don't need all of this, because you're working directly with Source. You eventually just work directly with the great awareness, so which eventually will lead and guide and direct you. And you can call that anything you want to. I mean, you can call it Jesus, you can call it God, you can call it Goddess, you can call it whatever. Ultimately, there's a wisdom that guides all of us. If we're brave enough to drop our belief systems and really tap in. And be willing to get it wrong, Be willing
you can experience it through any means. At the end of the day, I call it love. You know what I'm saying? And
yeah, exactly.
And if it's not love, then it's not God, right? It's not, even if it's a dark love, like we go through trials and tribulations, we go through the dark night. That's love. Like, love to see you through it, get you out of it, don't let you die in the dark night. You know what I'm saying? And just seeing every aspect of love in that. And so, because there's people who are in Christianity or in these other religions or whatever, and they're the furthest thing from love embodied on the planet, right? But you find those people and just those lessons and that personification of love, and just people who are just like you in everything. That's why, that's the fruit that Jesus talked about. It said, judge people according to their fruit. Don't judge them by their belief. Don't judge them by their misunderstanding. Judge them by their fruit, which is the love at the end of the day that's going to stand. And talking about myth and talking about Jesus, man, because he spoke in dark sayings. He spoke in riddle. He spoke in allegory, parables. Consider this. There was a man who had all of these wives, or there was a man who did this, and there was no man. That man didn't exist. It's a story that he's telling you, but there's a deeper meaning in it. And the deep thing about it is that a lot of people on the exoteric, which is not a bad thing, they enjoy the story, and they don't get the deeper meaning. you know, and there's people who read the Bible and all of these other traditions. I just use the Bible. They read the story and they just like the story. They don't know why they identify with the character. They don't know why they, you know, and this is so much. You're talking about Middle Earth. You're talking about, you know what I'm saying, the Celtic Lord, and we're talking about Lord of the Rings. I just really love the Lord of the Rings. When I was going through my awakening, like, those people inwardly, like, the Holy Spirit would tell me, okay, that's this in your life. That's that. This is the Holy Spirit. I'm like, I'm watching a whole totally different movie than everybody else, because there was like a download of information about who these characters were to me. Not to the writer, but to me. And that's where it's like a spiritual experience watching Lord of the Rings and shoot, Avatar, all of these movies, man. And they keep coming out. I just watched Us by Jordan Peele. And there's just layers upon layers upon layers of social commentary. But you have to dig to find it. And so Jesus taught, he would teach 5,000 people, and he would just give them these stories, and then he would say something that was too deep for them, and they would get confused and walk away like, what is he talking about? They didn't get it. But his disciples, they were like, hey, I know what he's talking about. He's speaking in code. And if you understood it, or you just have to dig for it. Just dig a little bit, you know, and you'll find it. If you seek the truth, you'll find it. And that's the power of these stories, that you can enjoy them on the exoteric, on the outer layers of just, you know, Legolas and, you know, the Battle of Middle Earth and all this stuff, but understanding what that is according to your anatomy, according to your spiritual life, you know, and all of that kind of stuff, how it relates to you, is really where these stories get their power from. We relate to them without even knowing, you know what I'm saying? But for those who like to dig in deeper, we see how it refers back to us, you know?
You know, last September, I went on a quest. I like to go on quests once a year. You know, go to find something new. So I went to Wales and with a friend who quests with me, and I was looking for a really ancient archetype. Her name is Ellen of the Ways, and we found Sarn Helen, which is an ancient path, and we were going through it. And there was some point when we were in Bedasil Coed in the middle of Wales, where I started to feel like I was living Lord of the Rings. You know, I'm like, I think this is, we're in Lord of the Rings right now. You know? And we went into some of the ancient cairns and stones and so forth. And, you know, Tolkien lived in that area. On the way back out, we went to Puzzlewood, which is supposedly where he based what Rivendell was based on. And we did get lost in this forest with these like twisty, turny places. And when we got back to Oxford, there was a Tolkien exhibit that was on right across the street. So I was like, I think Tolkien was actually guiding us through this. So I think he was a true mystic. You know, he
definitely
probably called it all fiction because in that day and age it was too dangerous to talk. I mean, we're talking about these wild spiritual things. Any other age we would be hung up right now. You know, so it's wonderful that that we can even dare to have these conversations, you know, dare to be heretics.
The messages are in code, man. I mean, look at the book of Revelation, and people try to read that and take it literal. You know, and he's, you know, he knew, like, if I wrote that, hey, we're going to overtake this army by the help of God, the people who have us captive, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he had to write all that stuff in code and use these symbols and the beast and the dragon and all of this stuff. And the people who read it, who he was writing those letters to, they knew what it was about. Like, everybody, like, all of those archetypes represented something else, you know, and that's just the power of it, and cinema and movie, and we're deeply, you know what I'm saying, enriched by it, you know, and it's all within the culture, and a lot of it is like, you know, the scripture said there's nothing new under the sun, and I really believe that. And it's kind of sad. You want some new ideas and to be innovative and bring something new to the table, but really it's all a personification, and it all comes back down to something that probably existed before, because there were some great minds who have, you know what I'm saying, come before us, and a lot of them we don't even know. And I, you know, just watching stuff like I remember the Transformers movie came out, right? It's called The Rise of the Fallen, and about these beings, these alien beings being in chains of darkness at the bottom of the sea, and there's going to be a coming of time where the stars fall and go awaken these entities or whatever, these transformers. And I was like, they took this from the Book of Enoch. Like almost like the whole script. And but for people who haven't read the Book of Enoch or would stay far away from it, they can watch Transformers and enjoy the story that they have no idea that it was even inspired by. It just changed the names. They're not demons. They're called Decepticons. They deceive you. They're Decepticons. It's like, man, so it's beautiful just the way that we can use all of this stuff. And I put it in my music a little bit, and just it awakens something within you when you talk about it. One thing I wanted to ask you, going back to the fairy lore, do you have any info on the elementals? I know you were talking about, when we were talking about dealing with psilocybin, we were talking about connecting with nature, right? Do you have any encounters, or do you know any of the myth or anything like that dealing with fairies or gnomes or elemental spirits?
Yeah, I have had encounters with the fairy realm. So you have to think for a minute about what that is. I think having a context for all of these things is helpful, so you don't get lost. But because people go, oh, fairies, yeah. But Rudolf Steiner, who was a great esoteric Christian, really had a wonderful connection with nature. And he would say, well, the gnomes are the beings under the earth that tends the seeds. They tend the seeds. And then you have the undines, and they tend the water. And so the undines are going to help bring the seed, the little plant up. And then you're going to have the sylphs, the air fairies, who are going to wrap around and help this plant grow. And then you have the salamanders, the fire beings, who come and they help a blossom come, this blossom. So I am part of the Waldorf community. So I go along with that belief system. So when I was in Ireland, there are places that are known. They're called the thin places, and they're called thin places for a reason, which I discovered kind of by accident. Well, completely by accident. I was over there thinking that I was studying W.B. Yeats's poetry, and I'm sitting in a cool park. Sitting by cool. They have these turlas, which are these seasonal lakes, and I'm sitting there. Nobody's there. I'm just listening to the trees. So I'm on the western edge of the world. You have to realize you're sitting on the western edge of the world. The wind's blowing. The trees are kind of rubbing. They're making this kind of music just through and then I see this bubble. It's about the size of a basketball, and it's coming along. Blue bubble, very pretty blue bubbles coming along in front of me. And I'm out of my context now, because I hadn't seen a floating blue bubble before. So it's floating along, and it has a fairy inside of it, and it's giggling. This fairy's giggling, and I kind of look at the fairy, and it looks at me, and then there's another one, and I'm like, this is like Tinkerbell. I'm having this encounter with Tinkerbell, and it was the loveliest, sweetest kind of energy, and I was like, check this out. There are these beings that are going around, and they tend this earth, and they love this earth, and that's what they do. So those are sylphs. And there are in Ireland, there's another tradition which isn't as well known here, and they're called the people of the She. Have you ever heard of them? They would appear, well, you'd have them in Lord of the Rings, so it would be the elves, the elfin people. They're the tall,
elven archers.
People. There you go. And so there are places you can go to, and if you're very respectful and if you're very lucky, you might have an encounter with one of these ancient ones. They've made themselves more available recently because they're worried about the earth and what's happening. They're worried that we're destroying things. And
yeah.
I don't think they're that worried about us destroying ourselves, but they're worried that they could also be destroyed in the process. So very much like Lord of the Rings, where maybe the elfin folk want to go, they're just going to go to a different dimension. They're leaving. We're at a point where we really can't just divide into another dimension now. Maybe we could. Maybe we could all go to fifth dimension or 12th dimension or something. Mm-hmm. But they're more concerned with us remembering. I think one thing that happened in religion, and I don't know if you know, but I'm a minister. was ordained by the Church of the Holy Beloved, and I do weddings and funerals and so forth. So I love Christ, and I'm very interfaith. But I think one thing that happened in our Judeo-Christian tradition, also true in Hinduism, is we became very transcendent, and we forgot where our feet are. We forgot to put our feet on the ground, and that was really why I went looking for this, the Celtic roots, our roots. So if you look at our world, I think our religions have had a lot to do with that. That Christianity basically taught to hate everything that was of the earth and everything that was feminine. Yeah. And these are things that need to be addressed. And it was really why I had to go looking for a very old tradition to find a feminine face that I could really relate to. And as much as I love Jesus, I wasn't finding it there. And so when we go back and we were really put our, there's a lovely tradition, a Celtic tradition, a healing tradition, where you have your feet on the earth and someone's there and maybe they're feeling lost or sad or something's happening, and you might just put your hand near them or on them, and you ask, what was the color of the wind when they were born? So it could be a green wind, or it could be a shining wind, or it could be a purple wind, or it could be any kind of wind. And it might even have a sound to it, right? And so you're standing on the earth with the person, and this is sort of midwifing the soul, where you start to blow. Let's say it's a purple wind, where you start to blow the purple wind back to them, and you might make the tone that they have, that their soul has. And so you're calling with this wind and with this sound. It's music. You're calling the music of their soul back to them. So it's very deeply healing. Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's an album right there.
Heck yeah. Yeah, I'm looking on your website, and you have a bunch of stuff on there about colors and color healing and what it represents and things like that, right? Absolutely. That was how I got in. Color was really the doorway that started to open everything up. I worked with a woman who was the daughter of a rabbi. And so we learned Tree of Life through color, and it was related to tarot and astrology and all kinds of things. And I worked very deeply in that mystical tradition for 10 years. And then I realized that the doorway, like this idea, and it's such a sweet thing. I mean, it sounds peculiar, but if someone really does sing hello to you, if someone really sings hello with your color, it's profound. It's very profound. And so when people go on a quest and they find the color of their particular star, in the color therapy tradition I learned, they said that there's a star that we all carry, 2 finger widths below the navel and 2 finger widths inside. There's a soul star. So if you can remember the color of that star, of your incarnational star, then you understand your mission. You understand why you're here. You understand the golden thread that's pouring out before you. And you also understand the day when that is over and you're going to return home, wherever your home is. So it's the color combinations tell stories, which you can see in nature. A lot of people come to me for color readings. They pick their colors and we read the story of their soul. Yeah. That's interesting, because I always I'm just led to it. As far as my wardrobe, it's simple. It's black. But as far as like my art and the podcast and things like this, I use a lot of purples and blues. I just always have. And a lot of people kind of in the spiritual community move to a lot of purples and blues together. And it was so weird, because I gotta talk to a friend of mine who does very similar music that I do, the spiritual hip hop. And he's a smart guy. And one of his friends who follows my work and follows the podcast, he told him, he said, man, you're supposed to be doing what TruthSeekah is doing. And he was like watching my podcast, and he was like making these weird analogies and similarities to where, like, his favorite color was purple and blue, and it was almost like I stole his idea. It was kind of in the conversation was kind of getting a little awkward. Like, hey man, I had that idea first. I was gonna use this, and I was gonna use purple and blue, and it got really weird. But I was thinking, like, there's probably a reason why people in this type of vibration, into the spiritual community, or resonate with purple and blues. It was almost like I read his mind and stole his idea, with the podcast, and even the aesthetic with the colors he was talking about. That I found that kind of strange, but there's got to be something. I remember looking at a lot of different websites that had purple and blue in it, back in the day, and I was just always drawn to it, and it reminds me. I mean, that's the aesthetic here on that I use on the podcast. But where does that come from? Is that kind of similar though? That's like you're drawn to that for a reason, and there's a lot, and I'm not the only one. He's not the only one. There's a lot of people using these two colors.
Yeah. So Kabbalistically, so we're going to alchemy now. But Kabbalistically, if you're purple and blue, you're called the angels that walk the earth.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, and most spiritual people are very drawn to violet. The people who are musicians are drawn to blue. Now, black is interesting because, in our dualistic world, people often say, oh, black is evil, And I had this boy come to me one time. He was about probably 11 years old. And he goes up to my colors and he picks the black bottle. He comes over and he shows it to me. He goes, I like black. Does that mean I'm bad? And I said, well, I don't know. Let's go outside for a minute. So luckily it was nighttime. So we go outside and we look at the nighttime sky. And I said, what color is that? And he goes, I think it's black. And I was like, well, does it have other colors in it? He goes, yeah, it has stars. It has lights in it. So you think the nighttime sky is bad? And he goes, oh, no. It's very vast. So do you think it's powerful? He goes, yeah, it's powerful. Look at all those stars. Look at all the space. I said, you think maybe it's cosmic and it's full of mystery? And he goes, yeah. He goes, that's you. That's you. You're cosmic and powerful and full of potential and mystery. How's that? He was like, he really liked it. So black,
I like Johnny Cash's song, Man in Black. So there was a reason he wore all black. He had a reason for it, for the beat down, and the ones that Jesus came for. He had this whole, reason behind wearing all black. So I like that too. But yeah, that's awesome. Referring back to the color, because like you're talking about, there's color therapy. There's an aesthetic. There's a message that I want to send with the colors, and even I have a purple light behind me. I can change that color, right? There's a message you want to send. So color healing, color therapy, and mixing that with sound, color, and the sound, and the tone, and then the aromatherapy. We were trying to get really intricate with it, and there's bands and there's groups that do this, but to really have that message of what you're trying to project, and really have it all together. Maybe if you're doing a concert, you can have the aroma there, you have the lights, you have the tone and the frequency and the key that you're playing in the different hertz, to really project that vibrational force, whether it's love, whether it's understanding, if you're whatever it is. There's color healing, sound healing, putting it all together. You're talking about sitting in that magical experience. Nature does that really great by itself, with a lot of greens, putting your feet on the ground, using a lot of greens and browns and those colors. But it's really interesting, and so I think we should have be able to kind of tap into all those colors. There's the colors of the rainbow, and seeing how they all complement one another and work together. And really within that spectrum, there's a lot of different colors as well. But really just the whole science of that there's smells and aromas and colors and lighting that you can put in your house that's going to make you feel a certain type of way. You're talking about the power of water, like actually just having an aquarium maybe, or just a little fountain in your house that just it's the sound of running water in the background, and even that can heal you as well, put you in that soothing place. Yeah,
it's really true. As an experiment, after I finished my 10 years with Orasoma, which was the color therapy system, I decided to make my own color therapy system. So the way that we started it was to do a year of immersion into color. So So every other weekend for a year, we worked with one color. So for instance, we would work with red. And the main theme that came up through that 3-day period, and sometimes we would do a week, but usually 3-day period, was strength. So either do I have strength, or am I seeking strength? Do I need strength? Is my body strong? So it always had to do with strength. And sometimes it also had to do with people being terrified of their own anger, you know. And then when we would work with orange, it always had to do with nurturing and creativity and you know, rebirth of the self. And yellow had to do with curiosity and joy. And what I found fun, you know, going through all the colors of the rainbow, we did 14 colors, and going through these color systems, you realize that talk about archetypes. Colors are like music too. I think they're universal themes that we all share. You know, we all have, before working with gold, we all have a place of brilliancy, right? But depending on which colors we like or we don't like, we'll be playing a slightly different song. And if people dislike a color, that's usually because there's something that's happened to them, something traumatic, or something that, an essence that they haven't really embraced yet.
Yeah.
So I have loads of stories about colors and what happened to people. But I remember one day there was a man that came in. He was a plumber. He wasn't even doing the class. He came in and he pulled out, he just went to the shelf and he pulled out this pink, really beautiful pink color. And I had one that's pink, and then he pulled out a pink and blue. And pink and blue we always called child rescue, pink and blue child rescue. And he held both to his heart. And I said, did you lose a daughter? And he started crying. And he held the colors, and he could feel her. He could actually connect to her through the pink. It was a very healing experience for him. So I think colors and tones, like the idea of the wind, the wind, you know, that when you were born, that this wind was blowing to you. And if you know the tone of the wind, which sometimes you can find when you're walking in nature and you sit with a flower, and you're in a meditative, enchanted world state. We're not in an ordinary state of consciousness. We're in this other state of consciousness. You might feel the tone of the flower. And I think in this old Celtic bardic tradition, the fairy, that's why they say that people would come back from the fairy worlds as musicians, as poets, as seers, as ovates, as druids, because they had to be touched with that little piece of magic, you know?
Yeah, be able to sing their song. Me and my daughter had what I believe to be a fairy encounter in our backyard. We were out there stargazing. I was trying to connect, right, with the angelic beings in the night sky, and they were just all throughout the forest behind our house. These huge balls of blue lights started. I say huge balls. They wasn't huge. They were probably like maybe 3 to 4 inches in like an oval, and they were just popping up everywhere, all just like flying throughout the forest, and they came above us and like started circling. I was like, wow. First I thought it was lightning bugs. So we see lightning bugs in the summer, but they're a lot smaller, and they're yellow, maybe green, but they were blue, really vibrant, like an LED light almost, and it was crazy. Right. So we had this encounter. They came and they swirled around us, and they went back into the forest and disappeared. I was like, oh wow, I'm gonna go get online just to make sure, just to see if there's any bugs or insects that light up bright fluorescent blue, and make sure that this isn't some type of different lightning bug that does that, or some other bug I never heard of. Could find nothing at all, nowhere. And they were big, man. I say, you know what I'm saying, just a lightning bug is a little small tiny insect. These things were probably like that big, just flying through and they were all together. It was insane. I believe it was fairies, you know. And you know what, we had made a fairy house a couple months before that. A fairy house. We dug a hole in the backyard and got her to set up with some of her toys, and made a little house, and it was a fairy house that we built together in the backyard. And So yeah, just shortly after that, we had that fairy encounter. So that was beautiful.
Oh, they were probably thanking you for
Yeah, it was
making the
awesome.
house for them.
I had a friend of mine. I had a friend of mine
Okay.
some years ago, and he was like, because I was really big into the elemental spirits and trying to learn how to see fairies and see the gnomes and how can you train your eye to see them. And there was a course that was offered online, and and you would go out and do a week-long ceremony or whatever, and they'd say by the end of the week they're going to teach you how to see fairies. And my friend facetiously said, "Yeah, at the end of the week they're gonna give you mushrooms."
That's one way to see fairies.
Yeah.
I went to St. Nectan's Glen. That's one place that people really want to encounter fairies. They're very active. It's in Cornwall. And my husband and I were walking through St. Nectan's Glen, and there were these little fairy lanterns, and we took photos. And the photographs, they actually look little fairies inside the fairy lanterns. I mean, just perfect, little wings and little shapes. And so I think materialism, the materialism that we've been in our culture for a while, I think has harmed us in some ways.
Oh, yeah.
And I think as we go into this new paradigm, I think to be able to enter the enchanted worlds and not completely lose it, but enter the enchanted worlds, understand who your guides are. I think that's really important. Who is your guide? Maybe your guide's Jesus. That's great. Maybe it's Jesus and Mary. Maybe it's someone else too. Maybe it's an ancestor from the past, a grandmother, a grandfather. Maybe it's, an ancient she being, or maybe it's a deer. We don't know. But when we make friends and we really start to encounter these worlds, I think they open up to us more and more when we're respectful. We don't laugh at it. We're laughing. We're not frightened of it. We're just curious. Like we want to let's make friends. What about making friends with a tree? So,
yeah.
I have a book called A Story of Becoming, which has been my best-selling book. It's been great, but it's a story from the tree's perspective. It's the story of an apple tree, and it's wondering who it is and how it's becoming and how it's growing, and it gets eaten by deer and it gets struck by lightning and all these things happen to it. But no matter what happens, it keeps becoming more and more and more of a miracle. So I think when we can tap into the natural world, we can let our despair go. We can let our so many people right now are just afraid that the end of the world's coming and it's all over and this is it, and we haven't even started. We're like the Mayan priests say and also in the Vedas it says that the golden age starts in 2025. So we're we're not even babies yet,
Yeah.
We're just starting to step into this new amazing 1,000 years of glory,
It's so weird just how like vibrations work and mindsets and spirits work. Because if you believe that, like that becomes your reality. You start seeing apocalyptic signs everywhere. You're just cognitive of that, and you're in this narrative exists, even if it's only to you. And that's how the universe works with seeing fairies. And I always talk about that. Like all of this stuff, it sounds crazy. And I talk to people who have had crazy encounters, and so many that they probably have lost track of these encounters with fairies, elves, UFOs, Jesus, Baba G. Like they have just crazy. And I've got a bunch myself, right? Then you have other people who have never had anything. They're just cut off. It's because they're not seeking it. Like I think a lot of times, I don't know, I wouldn't say by accident, but we have these weird encounters with a ghost. We see a ghost, we see a fairy, we see a UFO, and it lights something up within us to like want to ask more questions or want to see it again or whatever the case is. And you start having all of these encounters, and really the universe works in such a way that whatever you're looking for, you're going to find it. Like if you want to see UFOs and angels that fly in the night sky, you can. Now you have to give yourself time to go out there and look and position yourself and believe it, and you'll receive it. With fairies, all of this stuff, man. And it's really interesting that people find what they're looking for. And people, whether that's the good or the bad or the apocalypse coming or how everyone's wrong or, and it's just a really weird paradigm to be in. Because when I came out of the religious community, I was like really combative with the Bible and always had to be right and always found the negative, or at least the warning in everything. Like, even you would tell me some really good story and I say, hey, but be careful because of this. And like, there's a lot of Christians who do that to me now. Be careful with him. You know, he's going to get you, you know, looking at UFOs or whatever, just weird stuff. And so I had friends who like, and they still do it. Like, they're still stuck in that paradigm where all they see is the negative. All they see is the warning. All they see is, and they'll read the Bible and see the warnings. They'll read the Bible and say, hey, I'm supposed to be vigilant. You know what I'm saying? Vigilant. I'm supposed to be on top of things. I'm supposed to be warning you. And then someone else can read that same book and find something else beautiful, find spirituality, find that God is a God of love and understanding. And somebody else can read it and find fairies, find elementals, find angels, find out-of-body experiences, lucid dreams, leaving your body, like all of that within the same book. And somebody else is reading it. Nah, I just don't see it. Just don't see it. You're making it up. And it's right there in front of them. But that paradigm, that vibration, it hinders them from seeing that. Especially, like, I get that a lot when we talk about the power of myth with the Bible and the allegory. And so for like a lot of those people to say, okay, the Bible is valid allegory, for them there's a fear that it's not real, like it's not a history book. So they can't say it's a story within a story. So they can't. So that cognitive dissonance won't even let them, because it scares them that, hold on, King David wasn't a real person. Yes, he was. You know, and just to even question that, they can't question it. And so that cognitive dissonance, it just holds people back. It keeps them trapped in certain paradigms. And so for us to be seekers, we have to be open. We have to be challenged. We have to look at new information and look at it from, I say look at new information. I like looking at old information from different angles, right? That's powerful too.
Yeah. Well, biblically, they say you have to be a child to enter the kingdom of heaven. So in a child, if you think about the child, like you're out with your daughter and you build a fairy house, you know, you're staying curious and open.
Yeah.
The one thing that will shut spirituality down fast is judgment. Either your own your inner judgment. If you start judging other people, you start judging yourself, the magic goes away pronto. Mm-hmm. So one thing I think we really need to practice is understanding, you know, just if we're having cosmic experiences or something, just be curious about it, and then explore that with other people who might also be having cosmic experiences. Because the last thing we need is a bunch of criticism, you know. And if we have a moment where we're really starting to tap into Christ consciousnness, which I started to tap in through the Arthurian archetype in England, and you know, in England, the Jerusalem is down in Somerset. When you start to tap into the Christ consciousness, that's something different, and you realize, well, that's not a story. That's something that's real. That's the energy that wants you to end duality, to really love each other, to really love your neighbor as yourself, to really embody love, to be love, to be aware, and you start to walk on the earth really differently when that energy opens up within you. So I do believe that Christ is a real being and a real force. Was he a person? Probably he was a person. I don't know. I don't know what the true story is. I think it's too.
I wasn't there. I'm impacted by that story, though. I'm impacted by the story, and I'm impacted by the fact that I live my life like he was a real person. And nobody can take that away. That's what I'm saying. Like, just the power of this story and the allegory and the death and the resurrection and moving from death to life and bringing restoration and healing to everything in your life. And if you believe it, the universe works in such a way that you find what you're looking for. Trust me, there's people out there who take that same story and they come to a very different conclusion, or their life, they take a very different path in life, and the fruit of their labor is different with that same story. So it's about you applying it and you believing it and applying it to your life, and that's where the power comes in. You know, I've been on podcasts and been interviewed, and I've said it, and because there's a movement to try to like disprove Jesus, that he didn't exist, and it was just a story made up by the Vatican to control the people, or whatever the case is. The Council of Nicaea. You hear all kinds of stuff trying to debunk it. It doesn't change. What's it change? I know people who are addicted to hard drugs, who gave their life to Christ and overcame by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They're different people today because of that story. What's that change for that person? What's that change for the mom who beat cancer because she had faith that God was going to heal her, and not to waver, to claim her healing and to stand in it? She believed it. It became her reality. What does that change for her? Oh, he wasn't real, right? You believe a fairy tale. I get so many comments and stuff where people are saying, oh, your religion and God, and you're just trying to look. It's the power of the myth. The power in and of itself, there's no power, but it's when you believe it and you apply it to your life, it has the power to change everything. It's beautiful. Every single one of them. Every single one of the myths and stories, man.
The Christ consciousness archetype is ancient. I mean, it goes not only through our culture, but it goes through Egyptian culture, and it goes through Celtic culture. I mean, the idea of the sun god, that there is a light that can awaken within each of us. That's really an eternal story. It probably even came from the stars. Who knows how ancient it really is. And I think it's always with us because it's true.
Yeah,
there is this light. There's a light that we can tap into, and if we do it logically, well, okay. But really, I think we understand the Christ consciousness energy when we feel it inside of ourselves, when the Christ consciousness lives within us as love, as delight, then it's here, then it's on the earth, and you can't really even debate it at that point, because you just know.
It's the story of the hero. It's the hero's journey that one must go through, and that archetype. I'm convinced that if we did see the end of the world as we know it, in fire or famine or water destroyed the earth and got rid of everything, and a new civilization started, I'm convinced that that story is connected with God, the hero's journey, and we would see it reemerge again in their lore, in their literature. There's something about that story. There's a reason why that story is in every religion, and then they want to get defensive and, hey, they stole it from us. They stole it from us. You stole it. Everybody stole it from God, I believe, man. I believe if this place was wiped out, that story is still going to reemerge and be the story of new beginnings. And in that would even be the hero's journey. Like if the earth going through the hero's journey, being cleansed, being reborn, and new life coming forth. You know what I'm saying? And so it just permeates all creation. And to understand that and know that you're one with that is beautiful. I wanted to get your opinion really quick on this question we had here. This is a comment from my friend Chris Garner in the chat. So we're talking about the hero's journey. We're talking about the power of myth and allegory and these stories, right? And I mentioned, and this happens all the time, but I gave the mention of the movie The Transformers being like a plagiarism from the Book of Enoch. And then you have, and so many movies that are just like word for word with the story and the scenarios and the people and the enemies and all that stuff. And the Lord of the Rings, the Matrix, people are commenting here. Do you think Hollywood ties in a lot of esoteric, a lot of deep knowledge that are in a lot of ancient holy books that some of them not a lot of people know about? Do you think that these people are smart? Do you think that these writers read the Book of Enoch and say, you know what, I'm going to take that and tie it into the story? Or do you think that the vibration, God, the eternal force, is just kind of giving them the download? Or is it something that's naturally happening? Because it's continuing to happen. All of the secrets and all of the like I said, the myth and the allegory that's within the movies and stuff. Do you think it's done intentionally, or do you think it's like by a higher force just kind of reiterating these stories through our art and through our lore?
I mean, it's a really good question, and who knows exactly. But when I've gone back and I've studied all of these ancient books of mythology that I was talking about, the Mabigyan, the Liber Kabbalah, they're very similar in a lot of ways to the Book of Enoch, which is also an amazing book. So you find these recurring themes, and I think the fact that they're recurring themes means that there's some sort of underlying truth in them. And so we might even sort of drop myth for a minute and just talk about archetypes, because archetypes have such a long history. Now, I'll go back to Arthurian legend for a minute, because it just gives me a context. So I think we have these stories just so we can have a context, so we can understand something.
Yeah.
So in Arthurian legend, if you're going to go on a hero's journey and you're going to find out who you are, you usually wind up first going into the underworld of Anun. And the first thing that you're going to encounter in that is a challenger. Somebody's going to challenge your belief systems. They're going to challenge who you are. Yep. In that particular case, he has to kiss the loathy hag, the ugly hag. But you have to ride in, and everything has to be challenged. And you have to really develop some quick discernment about what is so good and evil, or what is distortion and what is aligned. And if you're going to emerge as a hero, you're going to emerge because you've sorted that out within yourself. So that this wonderful mythic image that Joseph Campbell was talking about is something I think that's very alive in everyone's psyche. And someone like Tolkien will really tap into it. He really gets it. He probably went and did a lot of initiations.
C.S.
Hollywood
Lewis as well, yeah.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis, right? A lot of the great writers that we love, they were probably seers, and they brought it out into the fiction. Now, as we get closer to the paradigm shift, what we might be discovering is it's not really fiction.
Yeah.
So yes, there are real energies, and yes, we need to know who our allies are, and it's all about each of us awakening in our own particular beautiful blossoming way, and so that's my take on it.
It's awesome.
I don't know if that really answers the question.
Yeah, no, I mean, we don't know. We're just giving our take on it, right? To say, yes, they receive a download from God, and God gave them that story. They never read the book. But it's just something to fathom, right? It's something to think about, because it just keeps repeating. I wonder. It's the things that keep me up at night.
Right. It is wonderful. I do think that there's this amazing, we can call it God, but sometimes when we use the term God, it has a connotation. And so sometimes I just say true nature, because it doesn't really get much of it. I like battling that negative connotation though, because we lose something with it, right? We lose something with it, and people are like, yeah, Christianity ill, the Bible ill. No, it's a really interesting book, man. It's a really interesting faith, and we try to we try to let the bad people just like run you away from it. Like they ran you away from the thing that you need, man, like the thing that you're looking for, and it happens so often, and I just feel like that's my calling to kind of show people, look, it's not. They had it wrong. Like they tricked you, that's not the real essence of God or Jesus, or it's essentially that life force that dwells within all of creation, the Holy Spirit, the Kundalini, the Chi energy. What is that essence in the Celtic tradition, right? Because everybody has that, that life force. When you talk about the wind, the Bible talks about the wind being the Spirit of God, and the Holy Spirit traveling through the wind, and like I said, Chi energy, Kundalini, pranayama, you know what I'm saying? Is there a certain specific name for it? There's even a name in the Native American tradition. I can't think of it right off, but like every tradition has a name for that life force of the Holy Spirit. What is it in the Celtic tradition? Or who is it personified as? Well, there are a lot of different tribes in the Celtic tradition. So there are all kinds of different names. But one way that in the Welsh tradition you would invoke that is you would say a win, which is interesting because it's almost like a min, but it's a win where you're invoking inspiration. So that's one way. And another one that's interesting is we were talking about Arthurian legend, King Arthur. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of, King Arthur is like well, did he exist, or did Jesus exist? Because they're very much in the British tradition. They're very much the same energy. He's like the Christ consciousness of the British Isles. And in all the research I've been doing, I realized that Arthur's not really a king that lived in the 5th century. He wasn't really a Roman soldier. He might have been that too. But Arthur is actually a title. Like if you're holding a particular vibration or energy, you become an author. Like you become a Caesar, or you become emperor, or you become something else. Name. And so the person in sort of between the 5th century and 12th century who held the Christ consciousness energy, who was really trying to help people come together, to give up their differences, to help people unite and really work together to create the round table, to bring the in some traditions it's the idea of Merlin's blueprint to Earth, and other traditions it's in other traditions you've got you're bringing forth Jesus, his holy grail that kept his blood, the healing energy, or in another tradition might be Mary Magdalene. But you're bringing all of this together, all of this. So he's the one that's holding that archetype. So if someone is holding a Christ consciousness archetype, you could be called author, or you might be called the chief of your tribe, or you might be called, who knows? But people would look up to you and see you as a leader and a rebel and a thinker, a truth seeker, right? So I believe that any of us can carry that archetype. And you want to think about what archetype you carry too, because not all archetypes are great, and you're probably going to live that archetype out.
Yeah. You could be more than one too, right? You could be, it could be, you know what I'm saying? Hopefully. Eclectic. Right? I see the Joker in me. I see the fool, you know what I'm saying? The person who's willing to do anything for a laugh, to make people smile. You know what I'm saying? You have these different things within your personalities, which are archetypes from these ancient stories.
Yeah, exactly. And like one of the things that Arthur has to do is he has to kiss the ugly hag. And you think, well, why does he have to do that? But in order to be a king, it means that you have to even love your ugliness. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to accept all things.
Yeah, there's something about that. I mean, when you say that, my mind just goes to people who have nightmares and being chased by a predator or a monster in the night space, or wake up having those night terrors with the old hag syndrome. That's what it's called. Right. You wake up and there's an old witch in your face. Maybe try to kiss her. Right, because because I've seen I've seen in the dream state. I was plagued by some weird nightmares of just being chased by this big creature, and it was so scary that I didn't want to look at it. I just knew what it was. But when in the dream state, you turn around and you face it, you find breakthrough, and you know what I'm saying, in your waking state, and you don't have that nightmare anymore. Like that nightmare came to an end. Hold on, who are you? Why are you chasing me? Versus just running, like I'm running from something, and it's going to get you. It's something scary. But when you turn around to face it, even in those states or whatever. So I could see just the analogy there, how it ties into the dream state.
Yeah, you see not all the stories of dragons, right?
Yeah.
Right. You have to turn and face the dragon. But when you really, you don't really want to kill the dragon. You want to encounter the dragons, because the dragon is the one that holds your gemstones and your power.
Yeah.
So you want to befriend the dragon, right?
Yeah.
So
it's all part of the allegory. It's in every single one of these stories, and it's beautiful. And so I do think that I think there's an intellectual side to it, but I think there's a spiritual side as well. I think that it's something that when you tap into the divine essence or divine flow, you'll be able to read these stories and then know that you're reading about yourself, and that in and of itself, like the books that you've written, they become a spiritual experience in and of themselves, because the writer, as they were writing it, was crafting it. And there's something like you can study and be like, oh wow, that's talking about this, but there's something when you connect with it, and it's almost like receiving downloads, and you're just like lost in it because you're reading about yourself. I mean, The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho, huge one we got to mention when we're talking about this. Like, I'm reading about this kid's journey. This I'm reading about my journey in the story and allegory of this kid, and pursuing his dreams and facing his fears and giving up everything to Jesus talked about it in a parable called the pearl of great price. And there was a field with treasure hidden in the field, and the person had to sell all their belongings, everything they owned, to buy that field, because they knew that within that field consisted of a pearl or treasures beyond their wildest dreams. So you just see that there's the stories within the story, and giving up everything to pursue your dreams and callings, and it's just told over and over, and it's beautiful. And it really is a spiritual encounter when you tap into that.
Understanding that each one of us is the pearl of great price. Each one of us is a precious pearl.
Levels to it.
if we're covered in belief systems, or we're covered in judgments, we might not see the precious pearl. And I think when we go on our quest, when we go and on our authoring quest, or whatever kind of quest we're going on, what we do is we begin to see, that precious pearl that I'm seeking, that grail that I'm seeking, it's right here in my own heart. My Christ consciousness that I long for is right here inside. And that's when the big transformation happens, and maybe that's the paradigm shift. Can you imagine a world for a minute where, most of the world suddenly gets that we're carrying, that we're all beings of light, that we're all these sparks of consciousness, and oh my gosh, we could actually collaborate and help the earth grow. We could help feed each other. We could help everything flourish instead of trying to kill it.
That's what we're doing, and then that's what the awakening is about, and everybody collectively going through this awakening at the same time. I think we're moving closer to that, where everyone's waking up, and kids are learning from the mistakes of their parents, and the generation that came before them, and seeing how dedicating themselves to their jobs and hard work and hard labor killed them, and killed their spirit, and how they gave up on their dream killed them. And say, hey, I need to learn from that, and look at the allegory within that, and it's just about learning from the experiences of those who came before you. You learn from your own mistakes, but to really tap into that alchemy, you have to learn from the mistakes of others as well, and save yourself a lot of, lost time.
Yeah, I think one of the great gifts my father gave me, what we were talking about it in the beginning when he died and I was with him, is that he wasn't afraid of entering the next dream. He was at home, and we were all with him, and we were all singing, and it was okay. It was okay to go into the next dream. And so how it's, you could say it's even more powerful to just wake up to the dream that's here. And by dream, do we mean that which is unreal? No, wake up to a real. We might be in a weird dream right now. And as we start to wake up, and we realize all these different levels of creation, and how intricate it is, and how delicate it is. And I mean, what if we just sat with the flower and just sent it like pink light to help it become the most beautiful blossom it could possibly be, and then did that for each other? What if we did that? How beautiful would that be?
Yeah, and see if see what happens. Like, what's the fruit of that labor? What happens when you do it? Nothing. Try something else, But to think that we have it all figured out, right? In our however many years we've, people have truths that are just really near and dear to them. But to think that it's the only truth or the only way of doing things, they've sadly mistaken. And I think a lot of us go through that. Was you ever really dogmatic like that, going through your seeking process, or coming out of, the negativity of religion and dogma and things like that? Like, it can kind of birth that stuff in you.
Sure, you can always get caught up in dogma, whatever religion that you're caught up with. I mean, my father was an atheist when I was younger, so we had these sort of ongoing. I sort of came in with a feeling that there was something more. So we had these ongoing debates, and it was interesting to be with him on his deathbed, as he actually decided, yes, there was something more, and moved into that. But dogma can happen really quickly, because as soon as you think you understand the truth and you write it down, it's probably not the truth anymore.
I know, man. It's so crazy.
if you can stay really open-ended and stay in an inquiring mind, then I think you can follow the truth as it changes, as it transforms. And so I think that's the big challenge is being with your friends that are truth seekers and continuing to ask questions with them and not necessarily needing to know the answer, just going for the experience of it and being willing to go to the wow, that's really not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
and kind of being willing to allow your self-image to shatter over and over again until what's left is maybe something closer to the truth. Yeah. And then to create from that space, of your own true nature where you're not trying to do something. It's just that something's coming through you. And it's such a strong force that you just have to create with it. I'm sure as a musician, you understand that.
Oh, yeah. No, it just permeates every aspect of life, really, especially putting out content and just, I have cringy stuff out there. You know what I'm saying? That's like, oh, man, I believe that, or I did that, or even, sonically, I wrote that, Let me ask you this, too. So do you have any experience with the tarot? Because that in and of itself is its own, essentially, the arcana of telling allegory about the person, right? And being able to relate those cards and those personifications on the cards back to the person who's getting the reading. Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, I've given tarot readings for years. I learned it with when I was studying Kabbalah. So I've studied Kabbalah for about 25 years. But in the early days when I learned Kabbalah, one of the ways that we learned it, the Tree of Life. I don't know if you studied the Tree of Life, but we learned the Tree of Life by learning the major arcana and the tarot. And I've been working on my own tarot set with my mother actually for a while. And what's really interesting about it is that when you work with an energy such as the Fool, which is the energy you need when you're going on a spiritual quest, you need the energy of the Fool. The Fool is the seeker. The Fool is the one that just gives it all up and is going to, step into the clouds and hope that they're going to be carried to the right place. And so if you're really going on a quest, you need that archetypal energy. And what's really fun when you enter the world of tarot is you realize that each of those archetypes is very real and very ancient. And so the Fool in, say, Arthurian tradition is Percival, or you might do the Magician, you can find Merlin. But it's not that they're just mythological or they're not just literary characters. They're actually ancient archetypes. And so when you open to that energy, you allow those energies to tap into you and guide you. So each one is really an initiation. So if you work with tarot esoterically, you're going to go through 22 initiations, which is all actually about finding the Holy Grail, or it's about finding the Grail, your wholeness. So if in some ways you start from the beginning with the Fool, and in other traditions you're going to start at Malkut, at the base in the earth where we currently exist, and you're going to move up. You got to get through 3 initiations. The first one is the Moon. So you're going to have to learn how to deal with illusion and deception. Can you walk in the night when things aren't as they seem, and can you find your way even when there's shades and shadows and ghosts and ghouls? And the other side is, traditionally judgment. Can we judgments and our belief system can move higher in terms of consciousness? And then the middle path, of course, the world. Are you going to be bound by the material universe? Are you going to be bound by what you see with your 5 senses, or can you open up to the next level? So if you can do that, then the next level of the tree opens up. So you're in Yesod, you're in the place of victory. And if you keep moving up the tree, so as you move up, there are these things you have to encounter. You encounter the sun, you encounter the devil, right? So what's the devil in tarot, right? It's the distortions, it's your shadow, it's your ugly hag. You have to encounter death of the ego. You got to shed your skin. And so as you move up the tree, you get to Tiferet, the place of the angels, And you see how much you actually have to let go of, how many of your belief systems you have to let go of in order to stand in the shining place of the higher beings.
That's good.
Where Archangel Michael would stand. And so tarot is, if you do it esoterically, it's very powerful. It's a powerful initiation, and it's got a great structure. It's been around long enough that easy to tap into and work with and use.
I think it's universal, just like the allegory and just like the myth or whatever. And I think that we're all going through that. I mean, I remember there was a quote from Greg Braden, who says that we're all initiated into the universal mystery schools, and we're all at different levels going through that stuff. But when you are on this path of ascension and a path of awakening, like, you have to go through those levels, and they're all good. They all exist for a reason. The devil is there for a reason. The devil is there to tempt you, to trick you, but you have to face it, and it's a righteous thing to do that. You don't want to run from it. You want to face it. You want to go through that lesson. You want to learn from all of your lessons, and so the darkness and the contrast between the dark and the light and everything that exists, that coexists together to serve you on this journey. And to get those people there with you on the journey, who are there to guide you. And I know, just like we're referring back to these stories, but you would see, like, the warrior, the paladin, the healer, and all of these people. When you would see these stories, these movies, the Lord of the Rings, they go and they get all these people. Or you see all the movies where they're like, we have to go on a journey, and they go get all of these people who are different archetypes, or different, like I said, you got the mage, we got an archer, we got a brute, we got someone who's good at other things. And so you find all of those people, and my mind goes to the Bible. I don't know, but see the body of believers, and it's talking about the fivefold ministry, and to really see a spiritual union of all of these different people working together: the prophet, the preacher, the teacher, the evangelist, the apostle, and when they flow together in unison, they move as a group. And you see that it's in the Bible. It's in all the lore. It's in your RPG video games. Hey, we need to go to the bar. And right now, our tanky person, he's in the bar room. He's been drinking. We need to encourage him to get back in the fight. And all of this up. And I've seen that in a lot of movies and a lot of video games. Not just one. It's just like repetitive cycles of getting the team back together, or reaching out to the high school friends, and we need one last hurrah. I mean, look at the movie It's from Stephen King. They had all these experiences when they were kids, and then there's the latter part. Hey, I know you're this. I know you've given up. I know you've whatever. It's your trauma. We have to deal with the trauma. Get the gang back together, and just to see just the beauty that's within the story, and it's telling our story, and we find ourselves in there, and we identify as one of the characters. Or 10 years later, we come back to it, and now we identify with a different character because of life and because of situations and circumstances. And that's the beauty of the blueprint of it all. I think it is a God thing. It is a universal thing, that we're guided by a higher force that just has this stuff mapped out and has articulated it for us, and we find ourselves within it. That's the power of creativity, the power of art, be able to transform and be able to tell those parables and stories, and to really get lost in it, but in the end, being able to find yourself in it as well.
Yeah, it's really true. And in the Celtic tradition, or in the Arthurian tradition, you have the Knights of the Round Table. They appear
Same
over
thing.
and over again, right? You have the 150 knights. And so one thing that's really, really kind of beautiful to do as a meditation is to imagine the round table, whether you think it's the table of the table from the Last Supper, which in some traditions it is, or if you think it's Merlin's table, whatever it is, it's the table with the blueprint of the universe on it. So it's sort of God's table. So you can imagine, you can do a meditation or a conscious dream where you go, okay, so I'm returning to the round table. Which chair has my name on it? Can I find myself at this place? And who am I next to? And it's actually really a fun, powerful thing to do, to return to the round table of unity consciousness.
You'll probably be a different character every time you return, though.
You could be. I'm going to be Belvedere. No, I'm going to be author. No, now this time I'm Lancelot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to get lost in those pictures, man, at church, and they would have different things, like either at church or my grandparents had a huge painting of the Last Supper, and you'd be like, okay,
Right.
Jesus is in the middle, and like, who's that? Well, that's the guy, and we didn't even know much about it. That's the guy who's going to kill. And there's one of them who had a knife in their hand. Okay, he's trying to kill
sure.
Jesus, and there's one of them whispering in somebody else's ear. And I just get lost in who these people are and the archetypes, even as a kid, not even knowing. And we would make up stories.
Right.
Okay, that's the one who's going to kill Jesus. You know, or we knew who Jesus was. We had no idea who the rest of these people were. You know, and it's so cool.
Right.
But, you know, even that just, you know, even with the 12 being tied in with the, you know, the 12 months and, you know what I'm saying, the zodiac and all of that kind of stuff, you know, the number 12.
It's all interwoven, and some of the depictions that the round table is the zodiac. In Glastonbury, in Somerset, if you're flying in a plane, you can see the zodiac actually etched into the landscape. So you can actually walk into each sign of the zodiac and stand there. So say like at the Chalice Well, it's the dove, so it's the Aquarian age, and you can stand there and feel those energies. And that's also supposed to be where Joseph of Arimathea came with his staff. And some say with the cup, and some say with Mary Magdalene, and founded the first church in 1 AD. So he put his staff down on Weariall Hill, where it grew into the Holy Thorn. A lot of people go up to the Holy Thorn was chopped down, but the part of the staff is still in the Abbey grounds. And you can go to those places where, you know, where supposedly the Grail was kept inside the well. That's where my journey began. Actually, was peering into the well, the Chalice Well, going, was this a cup? Was this a woman? Is this an energy? Is this a goddess? Is this an archetype? What is this? You know, and then what came out was not really what I was expecting. I was kind of expecting a cup.
A lot of times. You know, a lot of times in those stories, we see the you know, the hero or the heroine leaving their hometown and going on this journey. Is that a must? That happened for you, right? You had to leave and go on this journey. Is that a must for everybody? There's something powerful about just changing the scenery and just starting a journey, just leaving your hometown, seeing something new. You know, we think that this is all that exists, you know, when we grow up in a small town and stuff like that. You know, going to California, then going to, you know, England and all that kind of stuff, you know.
Right. So when you're in your own hometown, which is interesting because I just returned to my own hometown, but you know, when you grow up in a particular place, you have a name and they've labeled you as something, and you know, good or bad. But when you go on the quest, you don't have any of that because you're encountering strangers and they don't know who you are. They don't know your background. They don't know anything about you. And so you have the opportunity to reinvent yourself. And so there can be a process of breaking down that self-image. I think that would be really hard to do in your own hometown. It's possible, but it'd be hard to do if you don't leave home. So I think that idea, I'm going out to discover who I am, just like Arthur, when he goes, okay, I have to discover who I am as a hero. I have to ride into the world of Anun, and I have to encounter the otherworldly beings so that I'm redefined. And so, you know, I probably had more of a heroine's journey, which is a little bit different than a hero's journey. In the heroine's journey, you're not going out to necessarily steal the hallows or steal, you know, the hallows are the cup, the sword, the spear, and the stone. So I might go and looking for them. They might be there, but in the heroine's journey, you're really going into something that's more reflective. So in the Celtic tradition, they have something called the ovates. They were the seers. So you go back to wells and springs and aspects of nature where you're recovering the feminine faces, the many, many faces, the 9 ladies of the lake, all the different images. And you're learning clear hearing, clear seeing, clear listening, clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience. You're allowing those things to open up, which are almost completely lost in our culture. If I'd stayed in Virginia, I would never have opened up to any of those things because they would have been considered too odd or too I don't know. They just weren't part of this world. And the world that I went to, it was quite common to go and scry or find the well maiden. And so I could go out. I mean, just last week, actually, I went into a Longberry with a druid who had white hair and a spear, so those characters in that part of the world are real. And so when you break down, you're breaking down a lot of those archetypes, and you're finding maybe the more of the truth of who you are, then you come back with something of value to share with people. Even if they think it's outrageous, they kind of go, wow, maybe there is another world, another way, an enchanted world. Maybe I do have allies and friends. Maybe there's something to this.
Some of those people warn you from the big city. Don't go to the big city, because they know it's a different way of doing things. And I know people here, I don't go to the city. I don't go out. It's like, what? Right. Like these old people live in the woods. I don't go to the city, man. And they brag about not going to Walmart, and they brag about not going to the mall or going to the downtown area, and they literally haven't in years. They got everything they need in the country, and the city's not that far. I mean, we're talking 40 minutes at the most. It's weird.
Yeah, I grew up way out in the country, and I love being out in the middle of nature, living on the mountain. But when I was 19, I made a beeline for New York City. I had to get there as fast as anything. Yeah. And I think, I went to Columbia University, and I think I just wanted to be with people who weren't afraid of asking questions, who were, who did outrageous things, who wrote poetry, who, did wild plays on off-Broadway, who the cultural creatives. I needed to go find my people. And, the cultural creatives do reside in cities quite often, because they might be, hounded or vilified in some ways in more rural areas. But I think when you return as the bard, the musician, you found your archetype and you return. I think it's different. It's like the return of the prodigal daughter or son. You come back with the gifts that you found in a noon, and people appreciate it. I feel very appreciated at where I am now. And I think I'm a little different. I'm a little mystic poet, but that's okay.
Have you looked into the Order of the Eastern Star? It's pretty much the female side of Freemasonry, like for the wives and stuff.
Oh yeah.
There's a symbol which it's so funny. Is like it's an upside down 5-pointed star, and but there's little symbols in each pinnacle of the star, and they actually represent different female patriarchs of the Bible. Like one of them, would represent Esther and Ruth and Mary, Martha, Electa and Ada, and you have the widow, the wife, the sister, the mother, and the daughter, and they are different pillars from the Bible that they've kind of used as staples to in their order. So it's really interesting, because looking at it from the outside in, and we see a upside down 5-pointed star. It's so funny. You get scared, and it's a Baphomet, it's devil worship. It's like, hold on, these are like pillars from the Bible that really mean something to these women, and that they've based their order upon it. Really interesting. The Order of the Eastern Star. I didn't know if you had looked into that at all, but it talks about the different heroines of the Bible and stuff too. So.
Well, because and I think the reason people consider it evil is that the inverted star has to do with the journey of descent, and for so long we've been working on a journey of ascent, which we might need to do first. You work on a journey of ascent, and you get to know your stars and your angels and your higher beings and all of that. But there's a certain point, unless you choose to die, you'll get light enough that the next level is death, that you actually have to shift to the journey of descent, which is very, Freemasonry does it. You see it in Freemasonry, and I was very involved in the Essene order. I was an Essene priestess for a while, and and that, so you learn that there's a journey of descent, and sometimes they'll be shown as a upside down triangle, or the inverted star, and nobody really wants to do the journey of descent, but it's actually important, because if you're going to go out and you're going to find your glefiosa, your light, your guidance, your starlight, God, whatever God is to you, and then you're going to return, it means that you have to embody. So now it's not that you've just tapped into these other beings that are very cool. It means that you're integrating these essences, the joy, the strength, the love, the compassion, all of these things. That is your precious pearl. And so the journey of descent is then at that point living that.
It's interesting.
The living pearl, right? Yeah. So it's in all traditions, in Freemasonry too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I lived in the Masonic temple for a while. It was very interesting.
It's interesting to note that a lot of people who have been through the darkness, right? Whether we're talking about addiction or whatever thing that had you, which was dark, and you come out of it, they're like, you know what? I've been through my dark night, and then they have to go through that's just the beginning. Usually, do you have to go through something even darker to take that descent really into that journey of actually, becoming who you're meant to be. So a lot of people were talking about this, talking about journeying through the darkness. So I've been there, I've done that. I know what you mean. I did that 20 years ago. But then you have that rude awakening. It's like, oh man, I'm in this place of, a lot of it for me, exactly, thinking you had it all figured out and in a place of abandonment. And it's like, trying to figure out which way is up and down and all that kind of stuff, But a lot of people come out of the darkness and into the marvelous light. But even then, once you're in the light, you still have to kind of take that light with you back into even a deeper journey through the darkness than you thought you already had behind you. That's really interesting.
Embodying, and it's something. It's interesting because most traditions are going to vilify that part, and also in Christianity, and it might be, depending on which path you follow, it might be that Christ did that. It might be that he obviously, we're getting close to Easter now, and he went through the crucifixion, but he came back as a body of light. He came to show people this is what he did. And in other traditions, not only did he come back, but he and Mary Magdalene lived together, and they fully embodied. And that part hasn't been explored as much. And I think that in a way, that's why we have a challenge with it, because it's not part of the Judeo-Christian model so much. Yeah. But if we really are going to live into this next paradigm, and I'm sure we will, this embodying part, it's kind of it is the new paradigm. It is, yes, I've been through the dark night of the soul. Yes, I've kissed the loathy lady. Yes, I've embraced my ugliness, and I've also embraced my power. And now I'm doing my best to live as this precious pearl. And there might even be a period in that process where there's not even a sense of self. Have you ever had that, where your sense of self actually disappears and there's nobody there, which is an interesting part too. Yeah. In the Celtic tradition, with Merlin and with Sweeney, there's a period. Also, Lancelot goes through it. There's a period of madness that you go through as part of the awakening, where you go into the forest for a year and you just go completely crazy because you've become unglued. Everything that everyone told you in the town where you grew up, in the church that you were in, is no longer relevant. And now you're running like a mad owl through the forest, and I'm sorry that our culture doesn't have a way of embracing that, because it seems like we could really do that for each other when we're in our period of madness, because that's actually just part of the restructuring. That's part of understanding, oh, wait, I'm not exactly Anne with the PhD. There's actually more to this, and oh my gosh, there are these really deep ancient essences, and that's who it is. And before you get to the place where that reintegrates, it can seem really pretty mad. And so you need, I was lucky. I always was able to find some kind of very wise teacher or someone to hold my hand and go, no, it's okay. It's okay. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to.
People get lost in that, man, because it's so different. Yeah. And once they're in this new comfortable place, you know, I see it all the time. And that's why at this point, I never say never, you know, and Christianity is a religion of absolutes, right? You know, I'll never do that again. This is the truth. This isn't, you know, and there's a lot of that going on, but you got to be careful. I'm telling you, man, when you say, I'll never do this again. I know so many people, myself included, I'll never smoke another cigarette. I know, you know, ministers, man, I never do this. I know ministers who are just, man, it creates this weird, atmosphere of casting off restraint, maybe. And I think when you say God or the spirits or whoever, I think you're kind of challenging them when you say that. I'll never do this again. Oh, okay. You want to bet? And I've seen ministers go back into like being bound by the same darkness, even at a deeper level and degree, where it's like a 180, man. And you see people living these good lives and they got their stuff together. And a lot of times this comes with drug addiction. You know, we did a lot of work in the inner cities and stuff like that. And pastors falling into affairs and going outside of their marriages and losing everything that they've worked so hard to build. And ministers helping other people come off of drugs to get sucked back into it in that darkness, because you don't know what to do, because I thought I had it all figured out. Like, nope. I feel like you're kind of tempting God, so I never say never anymore. I remember somebody had a dream about me, a friend of mine, and I'm doing Christian music, and you know, I was getting into some drink. I drank a little bit and having my hand at doing some secular events and stuff. And my buddy, he told me, he said, "Man, I had a dream where you were on stage and you were cursing." I was like, "No, never. I'll never do that, never." And I remember several months later being in a club doing a concert, and I was cursing. I was like, oh my God. I let profanity, there's videos of it. I was like, oh my God. Like, I thought never in a million years when I'm a Christian minister did I ever think that I would do that, you know, and I said I would never do it. And it happens. I feel like we're attempting the divine, and because when you're sent to that whirlwind, it's crazy. You weren't prepared for it. You've cast off all restraint because you thought you had it all figured out, and you'll never return to that again. You'll never smoke another cigarette. You'll never, whatever your addiction or your vice was that comes back to tempt you or haunt you. The scary thing is that, you know, people die in that, you know, and that's what I hate. We're talking about the madness and it pulling you back in, and I think that's even part of the process, you know. Just to see how long you're going to go cold turkey, or see how this relationship, you know, what kind of relationship you really have with it. Even though you've changed your surroundings and hey, I'm never going back. Like, you haven't changed the inner healing or the traumas that those addictions and vices kind of comforted or whatever, you know. And so when you're tempted and tried with that, it has the ability to pull you back in. But Christianity has a problem with that, you know, of not being able to teach people that it's okay to mess up, you know, it's okay to fall short, you know. But we've taught, like, Christianity is the religion that kills their wounded. You know, they find their friends who are running with them and they're hurt, instead of carrying them, you know, with you, like, you know, Forrest Gump did. Lieutenant Dan, he's hurt. I got you, Lieutenant Dan. He's like, no, let me go. I'm gonna die a war hero. He, you know, to actually, you know, walk with that person and long suffer, it's easily just okay, we'll see you, you're dead later, I'm keep going. It's like, man, you know, and that's where you really learn long suffering and being able to walk with those people, and there's a camaraderie there that has been lost in Western religion.
Yeah, you know, one of the things, probably the primary thing that got me in, you know, really put me on the path was that I was living with my uncle in London, and he was an addict. He was alcoholic, but also he also freebase cocaine. So he was paranoid, schizophrenic, manic depressive, and he was my roommate when I was there. And he was also brilliant. He was a professor at Oxford. He did big shows in London, but he had this shadow side, and I witnessed, when the shadows would come and get him, and watched several times as he would attempt to heal himself. And what eventually happened is that I came home one day and he had hung himself in the kitchen. And I just remember thinking, I need to find another way, because I don't want to wind up like that. I don't want to wind up brilliant and crazy enough to not love my life, to not love what's unfolding, this one precious life that I only have a certain amount of time to experience. I don't want to throw that away. And I mean, not to deny his pain and all his whole process and what he was into, but it was a real wake-up call, and I had to take his body back to the United States and watch my grandmother scream till her hair turned white, and just watch everyone's response as kids. Like everyone, you don't realize, how in a way suicide is incredibly selfish, because it impacts the whole family. The dynamic is so intense. And so it was a real lesson for me. And I think any suicidal tendencies I might have had vanished at that point. Wow. But I knew that there was a process I needed to go through where I was shedding a skin, where I wasn't following with a particular pattern that might be part of the family structure. But I was refusing to follow that I wanted to find a new way, which led me in this how many people know about Celtic mythology? I think it's kind of rare, especially in the United States. In Britain, it's more so, but this ancient path picked me up. And I think it's because, like you said, you have to ask, what can my ancestors show me another way? And the truth is if we're still alive, the ancestors have loved us enough to give us this lifetime. They've loved us and supported us enough. That's the only reason we're here. And so we can trust that. We can trust. And then if we're going to seek the higher, we're going to seek current ideals. Like we're looking for love. Maybe we want, who knows? It has a lot of expressions, maybe in relationship, or maybe it's a divine love. We're going to be seeking that. But it's spiritual path has got to be one of the most difficult things you can do in your lifetime.
Yeah.
I don't really recommend it unless there's nothing you can do. You've been called, you've been picked up by your tradition, and that's just the way that it's going. I got picked up. It's sacred, man. Tradition. I had to ride with it. Still having to ride with it. It's and it's beautiful. It is beautiful, and I do trust it. I do trust my guides.
Yeah, you have to trust the process. That's one thing I do say. I have it really big on my website at the bottom. Trust the process, no matter where you are. That it's gonna be okay. It's gonna work out. Everything's working for your good, even all the bad stuff and backsliding. Falling back into those things, and there's a lesson to learn, because maybe once you get out of that and you learn different tricks and stuff on how to stay the course. Stay the journey. I mean, even, we look at, the biblical archetype of Jonah, I like to point out too, and he was running from his calling. He was running from God, and he ran, on this ship full of these people to try to hide away from the presence of God, because he thought it was going to go. He had one idea of the way that things should go, and God said, no, it's not going to happen like that. He wanted to judge a nation, judge a people, and bring forth God's judgment. Right. He's like, no, I'm showing mercy to these people. What? Mercy? You didn't show me mercy. You judge, and so he had this one way he thought it was going to go, and to just see the story of the people that are left in the wake of your mistakes while you're running, and you just see it out there. But it's that whole song and dance for now you're thankful now you're thankful, and you know how much the cost was, that the pearl of great price is, and how, you know, how delicate it is. So it's just that whole journey. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, hanging out with me. I had a really good conversation. You got a really awesome website full of tons of info, article, all of your books. You've written quite a few, but you have all of them listed there. So if you want to share your website, how people can book private sessions with you, all of that stuff's on your website. If you want to go ahead and plug that, that'd be awesome.
Sure. So my website is AnnKateSullivan.com, and my first name is AYN. So if you look up AYN, it'll probably, if you Google it, it'll probably come up. But yeah, AYN, AnnKateSullivan.com. And I'm on Facebook. I'm very easy to find. And my books you can find on Amazon or Barnes Noble or just about any place. And if you go on my website, there's a link at the end, contacts. You can send me an email if you want. I work with a lot of people who are in spiritual awakening. They're in a kind of spiritual crisis, and I help people with that process. That seems to be one of the things that happens a lot. And don't worry, yes, there is an enchanted world. Yes, you are awakening, and so I do a lot of that. And then I also work with some authors who really want to get their myths and their stories down. So thank you so much for having me on the show. I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed just the openness and the winds and the colors and the sounds.
We could just keep going, so I got to end it at some point. We'll just have to have you back on for another interview. So you let me know when you want to do it. We'll make it happen.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, my friend.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Take care.
God bless. Ann Kate Sullivan, ladies and gentlemen. AYN. Kate Sullivan. Good stuff, man. A lot of good stuff, and literally her website is just full of information, media, audio, podcasts, blogs, everything. Go check it out. Her books are amazing. Talked about a lot of good stuff, man. Talking about the colors and stuff, you know. One thing that stuck out to me was years ago I would listen to David Wilcock a lot. Like, I was a pretty big David Wilcock fan, and he talked about this in an interview, but he always wore his iconic purple or blue shirt, and so early on, so here's him wearing it here. If you're watching on the podcast, wearing purple and blue, but David Wilcock had his iconic purple or blue, and there were some interviews that he always did from his home where he always had like a certain statue behind him, but it was that purple or blue shirt that he always wore, and he actually talked about that and understanding the color and frequency and things like that. So I thought that was cool. David Wilcock talking about the power of colors and stuff. Also, we're talking about how on that journey sometimes you have to leave your hometown. The Bible says that a prophet is without honor, save or except in his hometown. The people know you. You look at Jesus, like, he's a carpenter. Man, you're a carpenter. Now you're doing what? You're healing people? Come on, bro. You're healing people? Really? And so when you travel outside of your hometown, nobody knows you. Nobody has that preconceived notion. And like she said, you get to reinvent yourself. So Jesus would come into a new town, and people would hear about the miracles, people would hear about the manifestations, and it would build their level of expectation. And that's where God would meet them, wherever their level of expectation was. And it's the same with us. A prophet, and the prophet is without honor in their own home. Sometimes you have to journey outside. We used to do that when we would travel. People would book us to come out of state or out of city where nobody knew us, and they just would read our bio or watch videos, and that's all they, got to make their judgments on. They didn't get to see your dark night. They didn't get to see all of the bad stuff or hear all the ridicule, all the gossip and stuff that goes on in your hometown. And they just rise to a level of expectation, and you'd see many miracles just traveling outside of your home state, your hometown. It was awesome, man. And it's kind of like what it is now. There's a lot of work, and this has been a process. This isn't like everyone's spiritual journey, but definitely mine too. Is like not everybody has seen the stuff that's not beautiful or not they didn't see all the work that goes into it, and that's with me, with all of us, you don't see the work that goes in on the back end. And that's the work that really matters, is the call to the secret life, which I'm always talking about, and the stuff that goes on the back end. So also a couple of different things we went into was, I mentioned the Order of the Eastern Star in Freemasonry. Let me see if I can find a picture. Most of you have seen this, but it's a upside down star. Let's just see this version. Okay, so I'm gonna so if those of you watching this, the Order of the Eastern Star, and so it's really interesting because each of these pillars all represent one of the women patriarchs of the Bible, or matriarchs, one of the different heroines of the Bible. And if you read the story, like there's a chalice, there's a sword, some wheat, the crown, and it says that they point down to the manger, but it tells you that what they represent. Ada, which is Jephthah's daughter from the book of Judges, and Eastern Star, Ada or Ada, is represented by the color blue and a sword and veil. Ada represents the virtue of obedience to duty. Ruth, the widow from the book of Ruth and the Eastern Star, Ruth is represented by the color yellow and a sheaf of barley. Ruth represents the virtue of religious principles. And then you have Esther representing the virtue of loyalty. Martha is represented by the color green and a broken column. Martha represents the virtue of endurance and trial. And I think that's Electa, the elect lady from 2 John, the mother and Eastern Star. Electa is represented by the color red and a chalice. Electa represents the virtue of endurance of persecution. Like, those are really great qualities that not only women should have, but men should have as well. And it's universal, the divine feminine or the divine masculine, and they both coexist together. Going so far to say I don't really do a lot of credence to this because people take it literally, but they're hermaphrodite. And the Gnostic traditions, they believe the original man was one who had both, was male and female, is what they talk about. And I don't think that's like a sexual organs or whatever the case is, but they get into some of that in some of the Gnosticism. But I thought that was deep. The different archetypes from the female, and even this from the Bible, So, and there's a bunch more. Those are just a couple. But I want to read this quick scripture. This is from Matthew chapter 13, and this is the purpose of parables. And this is why, and there's many different reasons, but here's one reason why Jesus talks about speaking and the purpose of parables. Matthew 13:10. And the disciples came and said to him, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" It's like, why don't you just tell them the truth? Like, why are you making these stories up? They don't understand you. Make it easy. He answered them and said to them, "Because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. Therefore, I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. And in them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, Hearing you will hear and shall not understand, and seeing you will see and not perceive. For the hearts of this people have grown dull, their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their hearts and turn, so that I should heal them." It's understanding the meaning of the allegory. You have to ask, you have to seek. There's a seeking process. Seeking. We're truth seekers. What is the truth? Seek it. Follow it. Again, in the Old Testament, God was moving as a cloud by day that led the children of Israel. Cloud by day, fire by night. If you think that your God just rests upon your revelation of God you had 20 years ago, and that's it, you're just sold, you're probably mistaken. But he says, but blessed are you, blessed are your eyes, for they see, and blessed are your ears, for they hear. For assuredly I say to you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. You have to seek. There's parables. Jesus is using analogies and symbols with a deeper meaning, and and it's to not throw your pearls before swine. And you kind of do that on the internet. Broadcasting. You're broadcasting pearls. You're sowing seed. You're broadcasting seed. That's what the word broadcast means, is to grab a handful of seed and cast it broadly. It's broadcasting. So you're going to do that. There's going to be those people. There's going to be those scoffers. There's going to be those mockers, whatever you're doing, especially if you're doing it in the public eye. Get ready. Like, I have to wade through so many comments and so many scoffers and stuff. It's not even funny. It gets overwhelming, the negativity. That's why it makes all of the blessings and the people that honor you and resonate with your work, that's why those comments mean the world as well, because you're going to get that kind of stuff. You're going to get the back end. You're going to get the two-sided compliments and people making fun of you and all that kind of stuff. But you learn not to respond to it, or you better learn. People want to hijack your platform. I've noticed that too over the years, of how even friends or whatever, like especially in the Christendom, I have to relate. That's my truth. That's where I come from, and I have to deal. I reach out to people who are stuck in that, caught in the dogma of religion and what it's like, what it feels like operating. You have your friends who become jealous of you, jealous of your platform, jealous of that you have a bigger reach than them. And they deserve it. You don't deserve it. You're teaching false doctrine or whatever. Like, years ago, even when I had a quite smaller platform, my friends would, message my listeners and take little jabs and stuff like that at you, and just little weird stuff. And then they start caring. Like, they didn't care until you had a platform. You know what I'm saying? They didn't care until you started being able to influence a bigger majority of people. That comes with the territory, the religious isms and schisms. So it's part of the process, and you're going to have to deal with those people. But, the wolf doesn't lose sleep over the opinions of the sheep. So it's all good. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. I really enjoyed this episode, man. I'm not really knowledgeable on Celtic mythology, but I'm knowledgeable on mythology and just the way that these stories are just reaching out through so many archetypes, through the Bible, through the Bhagavad Gita, through Transformers, through the Lord of the Rings, we just keep going through everything, movies, video games, music. It's crazy. And the funny thing is like, when you deal with religion, everybody wants to own it, like it's theirs. You know what I'm saying? Christianity, there's this debate about, we see like every religion like have the risen saviors, the one who has died or has been pierced in their side, or the one who had the magical garment, that they had power emanating from the hem of their garment. And that's in different religions. It's like they fight over who had it first. We had it first and you stole it. I think God had it first, man. I think that whoever you are, you tapped into that and you were able to receive the personifications of those stories. And so you find out what she's saying, that, knowledge at the end of the day, knowledge for the sake of knowledge puffs up. Knowledge for the sake of knowledge births pride within you, right? But it's about practical experience. And you have truth seekers out there who they're just going from video to video, from book to book, from teaching to teaching, trying to get the best knowledge, or to get the most knowledge. It's like, look, take what you got and apply it, man. And they're just ever seeking, ever knowing, and never coming to a knowledge of the truth, because they're always seeking it, and never get into a place where they can experience what they've sought out. And you're working so hard, you're being so diligent in seeking the truth. But there should be like some type of, end to your labor. You should be able to sit and bask in that. Okay, we're learning about fairies. We're learning about, and that's what, even for me, like, I have to make sure that I still tap in spiritually myself. I remember years ago when I was doing my music, and then I was getting caught up. I was spending more time talking about spirituality and spiritual practice than I was engaging in it, or talking about meditation or explaining meditation than I was benefiting from daily meditation or daily tapping in with a relationship with God through the secret place. I can tell you how to do it, but as far as me doing it, so you got to make sure that there's a balance of everything. And in that seeking process, to be able to tap in, man, and create those encounters, create those experiences. That's what it's about. But I've met so many people who just they just continue seeking, and they got the knowledge, but they don't have any power. They got the knowledge, but they don't have any experience, and they're still confused. And it just gives birth to more questions upon questions, because they're continuing to seek. Look, everybody's going to tell you something different. You're going to hear different reasonings and explanations from whoever you're following. And then you'll find some other info that contradicts the stuff you've been learning for 20 years or 5 years or 3 months. You thought you had it figured out, and it's like, oh man, back to the drawing board. Man, it's about that experience, man. Knowledge, man. Knowledge, that's what Gnosis really is knowledge gained through experience, being able to have those encounters and base your knowledge off of that, right? At least help you to do it. Garner says, I often struggle with living what I learn, but you just keep doing it, doing you level best. Triple M says, I agree. Permanent research in scholar's life is a drag. Building is cool. In the meantime, towards a great bon voyage. I mean, even like what we were talking about the other day, me and Luis Turi, was that Tuesday? He's talking about all these people being experts in a field that they have no experience in. They may have book knowledge, they may know history, but as far as them tapping in, having their own encounters, this is in every realm. This is in Christianity. This is in ufology. You have people who are experts who have not even had an encounter. And I talk about people talking about Christ consciousness, walking in that, who don't even know Christ. People telling you about Christ who don't have a relationship with Christ. And I'm hit up about, quote so many different people from so many different walks of life. You have to be well-rounded. You don't need to come to me for all your answers. There's things that I bring to the table, and I'm pretty well-rounded. But you need to tap into the source. And that's what I want to teach you to do. And at the end of the day, through these conversations, stimulate you to ask those questions and get into the secret place and grow your relationship with God, with Christ. That's the mission, right? But if you went in your learning and you're get some understanding. And so, I'm very eclectic with my studies. You have to know who you are, because even within those eclectic studies, there's conflicts of interest. There's, to just say that like you interview somebody or you listen to a lot of their work, you can't vouch for everything. Like I'm not, and for me, I would just, for an example, like if I want to hear about ufology and UFOs, I'm probably not going to your pastor. I'm probably not going to him to ask him about it. I'm going to go to somebody who has given their life to studying this, who have had encounters, who have had experiences, maybe somebody who can even reference it back to the Bible for me, find those people. If I want to hear about the cross of Christ and a really emphasis on the cross, or emphasis on the gospel, I'm probably going to go to, I'll just say his name, Jimmy Swaggart. Like, that's all they talk about. Literally, everything is the cross of Christ. And that means something to me, right? Especially studying all the, getting out there a little bit. You don't have anybody showing you how to do this. Who do you have showing you how to do this to be well-rounded? What mystics do we have that we can, especially Christian mystics, like who can we point to say, okay, they were well-rounded? Because you have all of this sectarianism, and you feel like if you listen to Jimmy Swaggart, or if you go to his church, then you have to be all Jimmy Swaggart. You really do. You can't get into anything else. But a real seeker, you're going to say, okay, this person's got their stuff down on this. Trust me. And even in Christian realm, we can just keep it biblical. In the Christian realm, you ain't got to talk about aliens, UFOs, all that stuff, theology-wise. If you want to learn about fasting and praying, fasting to loose the chains of wickedness off of your life, fasting out strongholds and demons that get a hold of our life, I'm probably not going to go to John MacArthur, a Reformed Baptist. Probably not. I'm probably going to go listen to some Benny Hinn. About healing, if I'm believing God for a miracle, probably going to go listen to some Benny Hinn. Benny Hinn's teaching's off the chain, man. Benny Hinn got some good teachings. He got some whack stuff too. That's the thing. Even though these people got some really good stuff they bring to the table, some of their stuff is just so whack, and you have to be the one to discern, not just to like, he said it, I believe it, like most sheeple in church. Ain't that what they say? He said it, I believe it. My pastor said it. And you don't even do the research for yourself. You just believe it because the pastor said it. Turquoise in the chat says, TruthSeekah, ever listen to Michael Tessarian or read The Irish Origins of Civilization? That's another name I was going to name, man, when it comes about some of the esoteric belief systems, man. Michael Tessarian is a huge one. And especially relating back to I should have asked her if she's even looked into his work. Because that's a great documentary or presentation that Tessarian put together. Tessarian really influenced me early on. He's in my bio. I quote him. He influenced me early on to. I can't remember the name of that first documentary that I seen from Tessarian. Let me look it up just because a lot of people want to know stuff that influences me so that they can look up stuff. And this will be a good one. It's a really good one, actually. It's an old one. He's got so many now. Man. Okay, I'm gonna go to his documentary archive. Anyway. Architects of Control, I believe it is. I want to say it's the Architects of Control, which is the first one that I watched, which is really good. So Tessarian's got some really good stuff, but then again, when it comes to, I don't know how much meditation Tessarian's doing these days. I don't know how much astral traveling Tessarian's doing. I don't know how much astral traveling Jordan Maxwell's doing. I don't know how much meditation they're doing. I don't know how their prayer life is. As a mystic and as a Christian mystic at that, as a visionary, you have to be well-rounded. So to really just join yourself with someone, they're known for what they're good at, right? I don't know. I just try to be well-rounded at a lot of stuff, so I don't have just one thing. We'll talk about it all. I mean, there's something that we pull out of every interview. I think that's why the interviews are so interesting, that people resonate with the interviews and hear stuff that they like. I mean, we've talked to everybody, like from all walks of life, every people group, and hear their stories and hear their spiritual practice and their awakening journeys, right? And you find yourself in that because it's so similar. Garner says, pieces of the puzzles, man. It takes a lot to find the pieces. The path gets crazy. You got to keep the foundation built upon the solid rock. The solid rock, for me, is Christ. It's a great foundation to build upon. It's a beautiful foundation. It's the only foundation for me, and truth and what that is. And so build upon that. And whatever's, when the storms come and the winds come and the waves come, If whatever's built upon that foundation, if it's not sturdy, if it's not something of value that is God breathed to you, it's not going to stand. It's going to be washed away with the sands and the winds and the change of times and the rising of the tides. It's like a man who built his house upon the seashore, and when the waves came, it washed it all away. So it's about having that foundation. Turquoise says, of course, he and Jordan were a great start. Yeah, I mean, they were a huge start for me. Like I would say start. It's more a start into the esoteric, okay? So my foundation, really is the Christian realm, right? The Bible and different Christian ministers, and I can just, there's a bunch there. Shoot, we're talking about Christians and Christian Allegory even. I always tell people to go check out the book, The Final Quest by Rick Joyner from Morning Star Ministries. Like, huge. The book is amazing. You can actually get the audiobook for free by using my promo code at audibletrial.com/TMP. But The Final Quest by Rick Joyner, that changed my life. Welcome Holy Spirit and Good Morning Holy Spirit by Benny Hinn changed my life. Bob Larson's book on spiritual warfare. So I have a foundation in spirituality and spiritual warfare, and then coming out of witchcraft and getting into spiritual warfare, and now being able to approach some of these other esoteric teachers or read some of their literature, because again, it's not about, for me, it's not so much about new concepts, it's about different takes or different viewpoints of a lot of very old concepts. There's nothing new about the new age. I'm not looking for any new truth. I get messages from some of my friends, my Christian street evangelist friends, and they're like, I pray that you find the truth that you're looking for, brother. Really, my prayer for you is that you find the truth. Bro, you must not know me very well. Like, I'm not seeking anything. I've already found what I'm seeking for. There's a following. There's a being led by the Spirit daily. But as far as like looking to uncover some new truth, I'm not like, there's so much. It's just different personifications of what I've already learned and other takes and stuff. So as far as like looking for the latest truth and the latest teacher and the latest, man, that's not me. You got me confused, And I think that's most of you guys too, but there's people like that, and that they judge you off of the person they knew years ago, I guess. But like I said, for me, Christ is that foundation, building upon that, whatever that is for you, making sure it's a solid foundation. And then you have the ability to explore. Then you have the ability to, you never want to stifle exploration. So I would never tell you no, but I would tell you to consult God, consult the Holy Spirit to lead you and guide you into all truth. That's his job. Like I'm not going to do the Holy Spirit's job for you. I'm too busy. I'll let him do that. That he would lead you and guide you into all truth. He will teach you. He will comfort you. He will convict you. Like, that's a relationship you need to have with the Holy Spirit. And if you don't have that relationship, we could change that. We can change that. Join us. Reach out to us in the Discord. That's what it's about, being led by the spiritual essence of God, which is the manifestation of Jesus through the Holy Spirit. And that's an interactive experience that leads us and guides us into all truth, regardless of race, religion, or creed. So Turquoise also says we're waking from historical amnesia. I know, like, you would think that there was someone that would be a model that we can point to, but I don't think there's any of them. I mean, Jesus is the model, right? Not even the disciples, but I'd say Jesus. Like, that's the model, right? Walking in holiness, seeing manifestations, healing, being very spiritual. We're dealing with a lot of carnal Christians, man. A lot of worldly. This is foreign to them. So when they lash out and stuff, they're only doing what they know to do, and they're doing the right thing for them. They really are. So it's not personal. The 4 agreements, learn that. Nothing is personal. It's not about you. Most of the time you represent something within them that they don't like about themselves. A lot of times it's a freedom that you have. You're so free and you're confident in who you are, and you know who you are, and you're not trying to find your identity outside of yourself anymore. You know who God created you to be. You know the things that God has put within you, and your flaws and your darkness and your shortcomings. You know who you are, and they're lost, man. Even though they have a persona, they're lost within that. Even though they seem like they got it all figured out, they're jealous, man. But a jealousy can birth a good thing. They could be jealous of you, so they inquire, hey, tell me more. What must I do to be saved? I mean, it's the same principle. To inquire more because they're jealous. I mean, envious. Envious of what you have. And that's what the scripture says that it's supposed to happen. So that's nothing new. That's supposed to happen. The Bible says that all nations will be envious of what you have. And it's legit. Garnishes most hate stems from deflection. I mean, you making them question something that they've placed their eternity in. And essentially, without saying it, maybe telling them that they're wrong. That's crazy. And they've not only given their life to pursuit of this gospel, or given their life to the pursuit of Jesus or religion. They've given their eternal life. Not this life, but also the life to come. And so for you to question that, for you become a threat to that. Now they become the fool. Now they become the one who has just taken every word that the pastor has said and ran with it. Not even looked it up for themselves. Believing stuff that don't make no sense. And standing by it and fighting their friends over it, fighting their family over it, It gets deep, man. It's just this whole song and dance of dealing with cognitive dissonance. Even though you're confronted with truth that clearly disproves what you believe, or really is a different viewpoint that makes a lot more sense, you won't believe it, or you can't believe it because you're already stuck within that old paradigm. That's why the scripture says that you can't pour new wine into old wineskins. Can't happen. It's going to turn bad. Truth anyhow. Hey, with that being said, man, thank you guys for hanging out with me. I enjoyed this episode. Really good. I do learn. It's not that I don't learn, but I'm not seeking. I don't need something to complete me. And I hope that's you too. And if it isn't, get with us. We can pray, man. There's a peace that's found in God that it's a love. You know what I'm saying? And that's what it's a love for the truth. It's a love for people. And at the end of the day, we can have these conversations. We can disagree. We can disagree and be okay and still be friends. Hope you get it. It's a lesson. Could take you years to learn. Dealing with religion. It's deep. It's dark. It's ugly. Peeks its head out. Triggers. Wounds. Hurts. It's all good. You're going to be okay. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. Really enjoyed it. School of the Mystics tonight. If you want to join the community there, go to Patreon. Sign up for any level of giving. That's literally $1 a month. You can get access to that. Or if you want to do more, let the Lord use you. Patreon.com/TruthSeekah. You get my entire discography. Like 200 plus songs. It's there. You can get it. There's new music. All that good stuff. My book is on there. I have to dig for it, but it's on there. So with that, I would say peace and shalom, guys. And we'll do this again. Love y'all. Peace, peace.
Your way is so much higher than mine. So much higher than mine. So much deeper than mine. So much deeper than mine.
Well, that does it for this episode, folks. To hear more episodes of the TruthSeekah podcast, head over to TruthSeekah.com. And if you're wanting to support the show and get rewards, go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/TruthSeekah.